To the meeting of the Westwood Planning Board. We'll start the meeting off with a roll call vote to recognize the board members and town staff. Mr. Gotti,
Here.
Mr. Paff,
Here.
Mr. McCusker,
Here.
and Ms. Conant is here. But your audio, okay. And I'm David Atkins. I'll be chairing the meeting tonight. We also have our town planner, Abby McCabe, town council, Pat Ahern, and Jessica Cole is our recording secretary, recording the meeting minutes. And this meeting is being recorded by Westwood Media Center, as are all meetings of the planning board. It's being broadcast live on local cable television, Comcast Channel 12, and Verizon Channel 42. Meetings are also available on the Westwood Media Center YouTube channel and are live streamed. And you can go back and find meetings back many years ago if you wish. If you're having any trouble logging into Zoom, please go to zoom.us, click on Join Meeting, and enter the meeting ID, which I believe is posted in the agenda there. Some basic procedures here. While people are unmuted, please turn off cell phone ringers to eliminate background noise. We start the meeting with just board members and professional staff unmuted and on the video. And as the chair recognizes individuals to speak, we will unmute them and promote them so we can talk to them. Tonight we have two public hearing items, and we will have a presentation from an applicant, followed by discussion, questions of board members, and then we'll open it up to public comment. I'm reading my instructions here and trying to find the great wording that we had. In the remote meeting format, residents and guests may participate in several ways. Attendees should raise their hand and wait to be unmuted and recognized to speak over the Zoom meeting application or from a telephone dial-up. If you're on the phone, you press *9 and then we can unmute you from there. All of our remote meetings require that votes be done by roll call. When a motion and a second has been made, I'll ask if there's any further discussion, and then we'll proceed to a roll call vote and restate the results of the vote. And just to outline a little bit about the two hearings tonight, the first one is an open space residential development special permit continuation. And the second public hearing will be on the town meeting zoning articles. And I intend to go through those articles individually as we did last time. So kind of each one will bring that up, any updates on that discussion, board members' questions, and then have public comment section for that will be for just that article. And then we will go through them one by one and work our way through to the end of that process. And tonight we'll be voting to recommend those articles to FinCom and continue that public hearing at FinCom on March 29th. So that's kind of the outline of that process. And we'll ask that public comments should be respectful and treat everyone with dignity, and we will have a good discussion tonight. So, Abby, are there any other changes or anything additional tonight?
No other changes to the agenda.
Okay, then let's begin with the first item on our agenda, which is 25 Clapboard Tree Street and 25 Abbey Road. This is a open space residential, a modification to that. And we'll just let the applicant come and start that presentation.
Good evening, everybody. Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Mike Terry from Petrini and Associates, counsel to Green Company. And as you stated, this is an OSRD modification application that's before you. As you recall, our the first hearing we had on this matter was we're talking about changing 25 Abbey Road from a single family to 3 condominium units. After feedback we received from the first meeting, we're back with a new plan, which is a 2-unit plan. And I'm here with Dan Green, president of the company, and also Craig Finn, our engineer. And so I'm just going to turn it over to Craig and let him describe the changes that have been made to the plan after after the feedback we received.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Good evening, Chairman, members of the board. Again, my name is Craig Finn from VHB. I guess, Dan, do you want to bring up the presentation, or Abby, or who's going to be sharing that?
We can do it either way. I have it ready to go if I can be allowed to share my screen.
You should be all set.
Okay, great. Okay. Tell me, you want this one, Craig, or go to the next one?
Go to the next one. We'll go to the site plan. Again, as Mike mentioned, the first time we were before you, we were proposing 3 condo units, and now we are proposing 2. A couple of the bigger changes of obviously with the 2 units over the 3, and is that there's only 2 driveway curb cuts now as compared to the 6 that we had last time, because the one style of unit previously proposed had his and her garages. So this new unit is a single garage with a single driveway servicing the home. So we've reduced the impact of the curb cuts to Abbey Road with these 2 units over the 3 that were previously proposed. Obviously, again, with the 2 units, we're able to pull them a little further away from Abbey Road, create a little bit more, Clappertree Street, create a little bit more of an existing, leaving more of that existing natural buffer in place, and Dan will discuss more about that later. Stormwater management here, very similar to the previous proposal. The homes, the roofs and the rear yards and things will be collected and disposed of in a small surface infiltration basin. It's a change from a subsurface system in the previous proposal. We were able to, with the reduction in the home and the loss of one roof, we're able to switch to a surface basin over a subsurface. The portion of Abbey Road and the fronts will be collected in the existing drainage system that was put in as part of the previous approval and managed through those existing systems. With respect to open space, then if you want to switch to the open space plan, we are still providing more than the 50% required for the site with adding this lot in. As you can see, the green shaded areas are our overall open space, maintaining that continuous buffer around the property, adding in the area along Abbey Road and Clappertree Street for providing a total of 52, right around 52.5% for the site. I think it's 52.4%. So, we see this as an improvement over the previous, and I'll let Dan discuss a little bit more about the proposed landscaping for the homes.
Thank you, Craig. So just while we're on the open space plan, I want to point out that it is a continuous loop around the entire property. And the only reason this area behind the homes is not included is we were being conservative because we have a slight depression in the ground, about 1.5 feet deep, to catch the roof runoff and landscaping drainage. So we took it out, and we're still at 52.4% open space. The numbers here showing the distance from the fencing to Clappertree Street are showing about over 50 feet and almost, I think it's 80 feet. So this is set back. I'm going to go to the landscaping plan now. And you can see this is showing canopy that, and there's a mark here. This line is at 40 feet off of the Clappertree right-of-way, which in itself is about 50 feet off of the paved road. And that will be saving that in perpetuity, deeding it as open space. Or not deeding it, but well, I guess it is deeding because the permit becomes part of the deed. And so that's how we protect it. The condo association will maintain it. And it's a nice buffer. What we've tried to do is, I'm assuming everybody's up to speed and I don't need to repeat what we talked about last meeting. So please ask questions if you do. But what we really wanted to do is to continue the treed feel. When you turn onto Clappertree from Pond Street, it's very treed by the temple. It's not as treed anymore in front of lot 1, and it's still very treed here. And we want to continue that feel, that more rural feel of Clabber Tree, which is, I believe, a scenic road. And so we've added some landscaping to fill in around the existing trees that are already on the group home, just to have it blend a little bit more. And then we're putting a little pop of color here with some hydrangeas and small plantings to draw your eye down the street, because this area is so fully treed at 50 to 70 feet deep. We put in 2 street trees, similar to what we have on our road, slightly different size because we don't have the space, but they will draw your eye to them. And then a splash of color on the corner, and then a little area to augment the thickness of the landscape, particularly where we have the parking lot and the porta potties. Again, to just draw your eye away from our community and continue that treed and rural scenic feel. The homes are set back substantially more. This shows the planting that is required by OSRD regulations, very similar to what we have here. We do place them in the field based upon what's actually there. So they might come forward a little bit, they might move back a tiny bit, but there's really only 15 feet of space, 20 feet of space between the edge of the detention basin and the property line. Although we do have ability to go a little bit over the line if it's needed. And then having some taller landscaping items. So as you look down Clabber Tree Street, it actually hides our home. We've got 2 evergreens here. Not that our homes will be invisible, but it's just reducing the scale and having your eyes focus more down the street and the tree line vista that will entail. The 2 homes that we've shown here, they are identical, but they're flips of each other. We have 16 feet between them. It's fenced so that you don't look straight through. They have a fenced private back courtyard. And they also have a front, and that would be a 6-foot high fence. And then in the front, there's generally it's a 3.5 foot white picket fence for a front courtyard. This is one driveway, this is the second, and we're landscaping in between them. Again, trying to bring down the scale of our homes, as well as give privacy to soccer as well. Open space we've been through. This is an elevation of the home. And this is an idea, this is taken a few weeks ago, just the tree buffer that will stay. So you get a sense for how thick that is. And the landscaping that we're proposing with the burst of color on the corner it wraps right around these signs. And then this is the treed view. So you can see we'll be putting 2 of the street trees in here, and our landscaping will be in this corner and on the far corner. And this is an elevation at another community where we've done a similar home. So this is what it looks like. And at this point, I'd love to open it up to questions. I want to state one more thing. Actually, I'm sorry, 2 more things. One is we've increased our donation all to the housing fund. It's, I forget what the acronym's called, Abby, do you? It's like
WAHA. It's the
WAHA. Yes, I
Minnesota
didn't.
Affordable Housing Association.
Yes. And we're going to change that for all of our donations going forward. We currently, once a month, we donate for all the homes that have closed. And that system has been working well. This will streamline it, is my understanding. And then we're still staying at 35,000 per affordable home, which is basically 2/3 of where we were at our last meeting, because we're at 2/3 the number of homes. And these homes are about 2,400 square feet, single family detached. So it's kind of easing into the density of the single family neighborhood, as we talked about at our last hearing. I have reached out to a group of 4 neighbors and tried to be responsive to what they asked for. And I believe they're on tonight, so I'll let them discuss how we did.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Green.
Thank you.
Are there questions from board members? I'll just go around and see if Mr. Gotti, you have your hand raised.
Sure. Dan, thank you. very good presentation. Seems like you really took the feedback you received last month to heart, and have done quite a bit in the way of landscape. I like the increased buffer that's maintained up the street, the way you've done it. I've run into a neighbor on the other side who asked about the green space and the buffering. And I noticed you alluded to the trees that are sort of off to, stage left here, if you will. I'm assuming all of that gets planted at the, towards the end of the construction of everything. There was somebody asking me when that was going to be done. And so I promised that I would raise that question tonight. Seems like you've got a solid plan here. And I think the 2 homes versus the 3 is actually a better incorporation of that space. So, generally I find it a good accommodation for what we talked about last time. Can you just speak to the buffering around the full perimeter?
Sure. So first thing is at the town planners, we had discussions. I won't call it a request, but through those discussions, we're going to install this portion of the landscaping and the items right here along Clapboard Street by June 15 of this year. Because we want to construct these homes in the fall, probably in October, starting to dig the foundations, we really want soccer to be winding down or over. Definitely done before we start construction framing of the house. It's just too tempting for people to come in, especially little kids. We don't feel comfortable with that. So we want to, we're going to wait till then. So none of this landscaping should really go in before then. If we can do.
That makes sense at this end. I'm sorry. I was talking about almost the
the rest of the perimeter?
Abbey Road, like buffering Chase Estates there.
Oh, we're the fencing, as soon as the ground thaws, we're going to finish up the fencing, and then we follow with the landscaping. We cut down trees about a month and a half ago, so that's why it looks so bare. But we had a lot of dirt to move around. We saved the organics and have to pile it and sift through, get all the rocks out. That's why it takes the month and a half. We'll start up as soon as we're really able to. You want the soil to be in the 50s, so that's generally early May, late April, and that's when we'll start, and we'll continue straight through for the buffers in the back.
Thank you. That was what I expected, but thank you. Yep.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other board members? If actually raising the hand is very helpful if anyone, or you can, and Chris, do you want to?
Yeah, Dan, I remembered your last presentation included a contribution to the town's sidewalk fund, and I did not hear of anything in this.
The feedback I received, and I'm happy to do it, however, whichever way it was I had a much smaller donation, so I took the value of that and just put it towards the Affordable Housing Fund. There already is a sidewalk on Clapboard Tree Street. If you prefer, we can split the $70,000 donation any way you'd like. And so before we were at 100,000, we rounded up from 33 to 35,000 a home.
Okay.
So that's how we had split it before between Sidewalk Fund and WAHA, is it?
Right. If I remember last time you had 60, it was 20 per home and then 40 for the sidewalks. Am I remembering that correctly?
Correct. That was my understanding of it as well.
Okay. Okay.
And so we just rounded up a little bit from 33 to 35 a home.
So the total here, it's 70,000 to WAHA. Okay.
Yes.
Are there any other questions before we go to public? Yes, Ms. Conant. Maybe, do you want to try to reconnect? Maybe, you're not muted, but. Erica, can you tell if there's something?
I'm sorry, what is the problem?
So Ms. Conant's audio is not working, like I can't hear her. But
If she wants to try restarting Zoom, that would probably be the best option.
Or calling, it might be good to call in on the phone number. Well, let's try it. Could you try reconnecting with Zoom and we can wait for that to try that first. And that will,
Deb, before you disconnect, if you go to the lower left where your microphone is, where it says mute, and you click on the little caret, the little arrow, it should bring up a whole bunch, and you should be able to select a microphone, and you should be able to choose the microphone that's built into your whatever. If you're a laptop or a desktop, you should be able to choose the right one there. Why don't you give that a shot?
what happens also, there's switch to phone audio. So do you have, if you switch to phone audio, I think you can have it call you on a cell phone.
Mr. Chairman, I would also point out there's a question and answer function you can use on Zoom. She could just type in her question.
That's true, but I'd rather, we should have the board members fully on if possible here.
Understood.
I'll try to.
Oh, I had you. Heard you there for a second.
Can you hear me now?
Very faintly.
Very faintly?
Yep.
That's unusual.
Getting better.
There? So,
Try. We're hearing you.
Yeah, we did hear you.
If you can click on the audio button where it would say mute, like Rob said, there's a caret, there's something that says audio settings. And if you want to turn your input all the way up, that
did
might help.
I did that.
So we heard you say, I did that, but
Yeah, that was it.
We can hear you.
You can hear me now?
yes.
Yeah.
It's faint. We'll all stay quiet.
Let me know if you lose me. So I was just wondering, I took a drive down there today. Let me know if if I go out at all. And there seems to be a little bit of a disconnect between these two and the rest of the project. And I know that it's probably not economically feasible for you, but thought it might be worth just asking instead. You had some reservations about a single family. Had you thought about just leaving it as green space?
Are you saying the whole lot to leave as green space?
Yeah, I didn't know if you had thought about that because you had reservations about a single family. So I didn't know if, because it just seems disconnected from these two and then the rest of the project.
Well, there is an area that you
Mhm.
can see because of the walking path.
Yeah.
And this right here is our landscaped entry, and there's another one on the other side, really starting the community initially after the soccer field and after this single family home. But I think it'll make it a much better and more cohesive community. It will have a very similar feel from the trims and the materials and the color palette. And it'll just look like the walking path is coming in and is bisecting with an additional green space. I feel very comfortable with that. And it's a very similar thing on this other side. And the real benefit to the community as a whole is saving all of this with the treat area. If we do go the single family route, and we built single family homes about 20 years ago, it's not our strong suit, and we don't have plans that suit families. We really build for empty nesters. It's going to be much easier for us to sell it to somebody else, and economically, our investors would not be happy if we just left it blank. So we need to do something.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike, do you have any questions?
No, I'm good.
All right, then I'll go to public comments, and I would ask that people, if anyone would like to speak, to use the raise hand feature in Zoom, and we will keep an eye on Look at the participants here and see if anyone has their hand raised. So I see Marjorie Ramos' hand raised. So let's recognize her. And then we'll recognize Nancy Hyde after that. And if you could just, as always, introduce your name and address.
Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Hi, Marjorie E. Ramo, 48 Clapboard Tree Street. In regard to the wooded area, Dan, that picture that you showed from the elevation was lovely. It was out of my house that we were looking at it.
Yes.
And we
I
spoke. That's okay. I don't need the credit for it. Well, I guess I just took it. We spoke of in order to assure the town that the wooded area along Clapboard Tree at the 50 to 70-foot depth remain that way in perpetuity, and not at some point perhaps be thinned or taken down by the condo association in years to come, that it should be, your suggestion was part of the deed restriction, and that that was perhaps something that Abby would want to address.
I'm fine with that. Legally, that's beyond my purview. So I know Mike Terry and Pat Ahern. If you guys want to come up with language, I'd love to avoid a formal CR and just have some form of a written restriction, because it's a very small space. I think we'd have trouble getting a conservation restriction. But to say that it's already part of the condo and it's part of our permit, it seems there's a way to do that. Is there?
Yeah, sure. We could, me and Pat, I'm sure could take a look at the special permit language and limitations that are there already and make sure this is incorporated and that cannot be developed. And it will in fact be maintained by the condo association going forward.
I'm sorry, can you all hear me? Sorry, Pat.
No, go ahead, Marjorie.
Thank you. As a wooded area as currently existing, that's the key, because right now it is literally woods, a small area of woods, but nonetheless woods. And it fits in with all the remaining woods that we have running up Clapboard Tree.
Correct. Yeah, we've done a lot of work on that already. We have landscape buffer areas throughout, and there's restrictions on what you can and can't do. And so we could include this in a similar way. You know, they can go in and do maintenance. If a tree falls over, they can cut it up or replace it, whatever, but they can't clear it, certainly. And it has to be maintained in a natural landscaped condition.
Great, thank you. I try to give me 1 second, if you would, if there's anything else that we spoke of yesterday. I think that was the important piece. I think it's a great improvement, and I think that the design, although I greatly appreciate Debbie's suggestion, it would be lovely if we were able to leave it as open space. I think that at least having two detached, it does fit in more with the roadway single family appearance. So I would give it a positive on that. And I also think that the buffer is a very big improvement.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Nancy Hyde.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to add my husband's and my voice to, Nancy Hyde, 15 Martingale Lane, and speaking as a resident. My husband and I both feel that this is a well done and important improvements over the prior proposal. So we really appreciate Mr. Green's consideration of the feedback and as well that from the planning board. I would just make a suggestion, given that the open space or the natural buffer to Clapboard Tree and the common area landscaping will be the responsibility of the condo association, and in consideration of getting the opportunity to build two units on this lot. I think it might be a nice idea if there was a contribution by the Green Company to the condo association account for maintenance of the common area landscaping. It's just a suggestion. It's not, they have the responsibility regardless. So I just wanted to offer that. But I do want to thank you on the planning board and Mr. Atkins for facilitating this discussion and allowing this improvement to be made. Thank you.
Thank you. We have another hand raised. Kate Nguyen.
Good evening, Kate Nguyen, 10 Cedar Hill Drive. Thank you very much for this presentation. And while it is an improvement over the 3 units on this lot, I do just want to point out that I was on the pedestrian and bike safety committee when they were first developing this site. And one of the things we were looking for was sidewalks on both sides of the street, which we were not able to get. And so safety is my point of view as I'm looking at this plan for pedestrians. And it does concern me that we have more than a single driveway now directly across the street from the soccer fields. And I appreciate the contribution to WAHA that 2 units brings. But it does, we came to an agreement originally that was a balance between the needs of the town and the needs of the developer. And at this point, my feelings are about that the agreement has changed so that it's no longer a balance with the pedestrian safety on Abbey Road. So I just wanted to, very pleased with what I see. It looks beautiful. You did a lovely job, but I have an eye towards the children and families who will be at that soccer field. And I would prefer a single driveway, meaning it would be a single family home versus 2. And thank you for your time. And that's all I had.
Thank you for your comment. Mr. Green, did you want to talk any more about that driveway?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I think just pointing out the access points that we have for bike traffic, we're really trying to bring everybody in off this trail, which goes back to the temple area and out. There's a pathway along the side of the temple that goes out to Buckmaster Pond, and it also connects with Chase Estates. And I imagine for neighborhood kids, that's how they will get to the soccer fields, whether they're playing or they're participating in a team or just hanging out with their friends. And hopefully not too much after dark. By the statistics with 55 plus housing, and these are limited to 2-bedroom homes, is that the traffic is about 1/3 of what a single family home is. And there are virtually no peak hour trips from 55 plus housing. And so I think it actually, even though there are 2 homes, because they're each limited to 2 bedrooms, whereas a typical single family home will be 4 or 5 bedrooms and lots more traffic, it's probably fewer cars with what we're proposing. So that part's counterintuitive. And I really would prefer to keep the sidewalk on the soccer field side because that's less interaction with the kids and vehicular traffic. So I feel it's safer. We also have a sidewalk out here on Clapboard Tree, and we've put in a crosswalk. When the intersection gets redone at Winter Street, that will further aid access to more parts of the town, but the sidewalk does continue all the way down to Winter Street. So I hope that we've done that there, and we've made sure there are very good sight lines to the field as well as for the driveways. We were very sensitive to that.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Are there any other comments? Would anyone like to raise their hand? Yes. David.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. If you could identify yourself and address first.
Hi, David Warshay, 18 Colby Way, president of Chase Estates here. My comments on this, I'm fine personally with the two-house proposal. It's been well thought out, et cetera. I think it's, is viable. On that, which Rob Gotti touched upon, it's really imperative to the Chase Estates neighborhood that all the large trees that were cut down are replaced with, sizable trees that, reinstates a true buffer where, folks don't have to have a really unobstructed view of the whole townhouse community. I think that's, very important for mature landscaping to be replaced where, a ton of trees were cut down, which was a bit shocking in the beginning, but, hopefully that can be taken care of. And that's point one. The point two is, can you just confirm about the first lot coming around the corner from Clapboard to Winter Street? There's one more lot that's not built upon yet. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Right. Just caught my eye today. They had utility work going on. They had Winter Street closed at the beginning for safety reasons. They don't want cars flying around the bend. Is that going to be an issue at all with a driveway there? If the street is not turned into a normal street under, I think it's called the Complete Streets program, where I think funding was not able to be procured. Is that first lot going to have an issue about anyone coming out of the driveway? It being a sort of a blind turn there?
Mr. Atkins, you might be better equipped than I am about the redoing of the intersection on Winter Street, but my understanding was that funding was procured and that was going to be happening over the next year, but I don't know for sure.
Well, that'd be much better if it did happen, to make it a standard T design intersection than what it currently is.
Abby, you might have the latest from Todd.
Right, there is some intersection work planned that is coming forward. I believe this upcoming construction season. I can't remember if it was Complete Streets or not, but that construction is planned. And then that lot itself will need to apply for a curb cut permit from Public Works Department. So they'll take another look at it, but I wasn't aware of any issues with that driveway as of yet.
And we have someone who's interested in purchasing that lot, and we've had very clear discussions with them that the driveway should be as tight to the neighboring lot where the home is constructed as possible, just for that safety issue that Mr. Warshay brought up.
Right. On that note too, how deep is that lot there? Because right now there's only like a 30-foot, just a buffer of existing trees or whatever growth there. It almost seems like that lot is really going to be part of the ball field almost. Is that just a subjective impression?
It goes up to the ball field. You can see right here, but this line right here is pretty much the buildable area. So there is a buffer on the back.
Yeah, can you clarify for me? I think David was thinking that the lot in question is actually almost on the bend here.
No, it's not. You can see there's the bend. It feels closer, but the driveway is going to actually be up here. And you can see there are two other driveways closer and a third one directly across. And then when this becomes a 90-degree intersection, this land will be, I assume that the town will let it become natural and it will fill in and be more of a natural buffer along Clever-Tree Street.
90 degrees, that's really the solution here, to put everything to rest.
I agree, but that's not my area.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Warshay. Are there any other questions? People would like to raise their hand.
Dave, I had one question that came up. Dan, you mentioned it'd be a 2-bedroom. Can you go to the slide that shows the floor plan?
Yep. Oh, I can't because I didn't upload it. Okay. That wasn't good on my part. Let me get that up.
I seem to remember that over each garage, it indicates something about a study or office.
Yeah, it said studio or office.
So it's going to be finished?
Yes.
Abby, do we have something that would indicate it needs to be like a cased opening or a certain width or in our bylaw for 55 and older?
We do have that in our bylaw. I think we also have it in the original special permit decision.
Right.
So I think it's shown as open, right, Dan? Is it? I think it's
It
shown
is,
as like that open
that
area.
we're very working closely with the building department on this, and it has to be a 5-foot opening.
That's what
Minimum.
I was going to say 6, but then that thought too big.
Yep, no,
So that's
they
fine,
require
like
5.
A 5-foot cased opening.
Yeah, I think you can do like the double office glass doors, but it can't be a solid door. It can't be, we don't have a closet in there.
Yeah, the purpose was so that it's not easily changed into a bedroom.
Correct.
A simple 30-inch door or something like that.
Yes, that's why we do that. And that's how we've conformed with our den on the first floor.
Okay, that's what when you said 2 bedrooms, it reminded me of that.
Yep.
Plan.
Yeah, and this one is 2 master bedrooms, one on the first floor and one on the second floor.
And so just to clarify, so that's what's changing is it was as a single family house, it could be anything, but it's being brought into the development now, subject to all the constraints and conditions of the development. So it has to be 2 bedrooms and there can't be a easily converted study kind of thing.
Exactly.
Abby, if you want to pull it up, it's item AC under this hearing list, because it was uploaded to our packet.
Yes.
Let's see. I think I can pull it up if Dan's, but it looks like is Dan.
You want me to stop sharing? Sure.
Or you're almost there. Okay.
Oh, you want me to get it? I can do it. I have it right here.
Okay.
Let me open it first and I'll share this one. Oh, I've pulled up the wrong one though. Do you have yours, Abby?
I can share it. I have it on mine.
Okay.
Give me 1 second here.
Yep, that's the one.
So this is the studio that you're talking about right over here.
Correct. And that is
That's
over the
beautiful,
garage
yeah.
space, but set back a little bit. You can see that opening. There's a little bit of tweaking that needs to be done because we chose homes that were slightly bigger than last time. And I just can't get the architecture done timely, but the concept is here. And if you notice, my note says note second floor configuration will likely change. There are a couple of things I'd like to do. That's not a gracious master bath. That's a very small closet, but the concept is that area would be a bedroom, bath, and closet. We don't need the tech space now on the top of the stairs because we have this studio office. So somehow we can figure out how to reconfigure all this so that we still have the same uses, but a slightly different layout within the existing footprint.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Green. Any?
So I have one more. I mean,
Yep.
Dave, one more question. Dan, you said you expect people to use the path to go over to the soccer field. That was the intent of it.
I think for those who are old school about this and like to be able to bike to it and that live nearby, yes, I think that would be a great way to get there.
So with a lot of foot traffic and bike traffic, is there a crosswalk there?
We don't have a crosswalk at this point. I think if we find that generally we're not expecting a lot of traffic, period, except as people come in and drop off for games. And I think the bulk of it will be coming in and off of Cloudbird Tree Street. So if that's the case, then the location of the walking path is really pretty ideal because there wouldn't be that conflict with cars. And it would be up to the town. They could make one portion of this one way into the parking lot and one way out, if that will help with traffic flow. I think we need some empirical evidence of what will work best, because I just don't know. And we're amenable because none of our people want to have an accident with a child. So we'll work with the town, and even after we're done.
Thank you.
Thank you. I wonder, Abby, if would that be something that we should capture in a condition just to just evaluate that? And I know we did that for another project. It's not really a binding. Well, we could make it that there's a commitment to assess safety and do something.
We're happy with some wording on that if you want Abby, Pat, and Mike to work something out. That's fine.
Right. Are there other questions or comments? I'm just checking the attendees to see if anybody's raised their hand. I don't see any other hands raised. So I think that we also need to remember that part of our decision tonight is to consider the changing the language to have the payments go directly to Waha. So that would be a part of this as well. Was there any? We have a memo from the housing agent about that. Does anyone have any questions or concerns about that? And do we have any other? I mean, how do people generally feel about this? Are we? I'll ask. Are we ready to make a?
I'm inclined to make a motion in favor based on, clearly Dan put a lot of thought into the feedback that was provided to him at our last meeting, at the last part of this public hearing, and has maintained a very nice buffer out onto Clabbertree Street. So I'm finding, no problem with what I have seen in terms of the revisions.
Anybody, would you like to go ahead and make a motion, or?
I can. Do you want to hear from anybody else? Anybody else got any comments? At just point of procedure, Dave or Abby, we'll make a motion to accept the application as revised here tonight, and we do that before we change the language that Dave just referred to with regards to Waha, or do we do the other one first?
Let's see, I have a draft motion ready if you want. Do you want me to pull it up on the screen? I think would that be
Yeah,
easier?
Why don't we put that up on the screen and then we can make sure it's consistent with what everybody's thinking.
Hold on, I just have to open it.
And I think it's also important to state our reasons why or why not we would do this. So.
So in your packet, I had suggested some conditions. So the first one, I think you could make a motion to approve the application request for the OSRD special permit amendment for the 2 additional units at 25 Clappertree Street. And the first suggested condition is that the applicant shall file the A&R plan to combine this lot 2 into the rest of the OSRD at the homes at 45, and that should be submitted prior to the issuance of any building permits. Condition 2 is related to the landscaping. This is essentially saying that the landscaping on the group home lot, the landscaping along Clappertree Street, so that's those 2 trees in front of and plantings in front of lot 2, and then also at that corner in front of the field, for that to be installed and completed by June 15th. And then the landscaping itself on lot 2, that's the landscaping around those houses prior to occupancy. which if that happens to be during the winter, we'd recommend that being the next available planting season, which is usually in the spring or the fall. Condition 3 recommendation is related to contacting Public Works to inspect the drainage basin prior when you're working on that and putting in the soils. Condition 4 is for the applicant to submit the funds, which is the 35 per the 2 units, so the 70,000 be contributed directly to the Affordable Housing Associates, SWAHA, within 30 days of the sale. And then condition 5 is to update that condition 1B of that original special permit so that all the contributions, so also on the 38 units, for that all to be directly to WAHA. Condition 6, that suggestion is that all the other existing conditions still remain in full force and effect. And then condition 7 is about updating, I just wrote this here now, listen to what we heard during the public hearing comments about providing the updated legal documents for this new law, including the that maintaining that existing landscaping and that buffer on lot 2 in perpetuity. So those legal documents would need to be updated. Then I know there was a suggestion about a contribution about maintenance for the homeowners association. So you haven't talked about that yet, but that was another condition mentioned during the hearing.
Maybe Dan could talk to that, but typically condo associations are started up with a budget and with the money's in their funds ready to go.
Yeah, we subsidize over the first 2 years anyways, so we're putting in plenty of money. I think it's fine to have the obligation, and the association with the fees we have so far will be able to cover this by adding 2 more homes to the association. There'll be plenty to maintain that landscaping and the irrigation required.
Okay, so condition 7 is to address the perpetuity of the open space there on the front, the natural buffer area. And did we want to add something to what was the other item? The safety of, just to say that to evaluate the safety of the walking path across the street.
But yeah, if we need to put in a crosswalk.
Yeah, I think that just painting a crosswalk. Well, I think we should build in some process to check that's to assess that situation and work with the town to come up with a safe remediation if it looks like if there's an issue there.
Okay. And I would like to remind everyone that there's no parking allowed on Abbey Road. And so we'll be working with the town to enforce that. So that should help with the safety as well.
So are there any other conditions that anything we're not capturing here?
So one question regarding the buffering on the backside on the Chase Estate stuff that Mr. Warshay had asked about. Are there existing conditions that say sort of a time frame for when that is supposed to be completed relative to the completion of the construction of those units back there? I mean, I know you talked about you need to be above a certain soil temperature and things like that. I just don't know, Dan, if you're planning that for this spring or, because we're making certain conditions here relative to the clabber tree side for this spring. I didn't know how that impacted the backside of the development.
I'll have to check with our construction folks because there are some stockpiles of material there that we're moving around on site, just waiting for the ground to thaw out. As we can get those piles down and get the loam spread about, the plan is to landscape along the property line. We can't do anything that's more inboard because it'll just get wiped out during the construction of the homes. And my memory, I'm not 100% sure on this, but my memory is that we needed to put in that landscaping by phase. And so the area he's talking about is really phases 3 and 4, and we're into phase 2 right now.
Right. I mean, it makes sense that you can't do it until the work is actually done. I just wanted to ask that clarifying question.
Yeah, we're very sensitive, and as much as the neighbors want to have it, we do too, and so will our buyers when they move in. So there's a mutuality here. As soon as we can and know that it'll be safe, we will put it in.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Abby, why don't you pull up the, you had prepared some draft findings as well, and just to see if board members, if we're in agreement on those findings, because it's helpful if we can state our reasons for why we would approve this, because we are, as I said before, this was a great project and it's changed now. It seems like things are, we should acknowledge that why we're doing this, the benefit to the community versus we could just not do anything.
Can you see this?
We're still seeing your draft language on the approval.
Okay, all right. I might have to stop and then open it. Okay. Can you see this one?
Yes.
Okay.
And I mean, and just so everybody knows, I mean, we have all this material in advance so that we've all read these things, but Abby prepared kind of different suggestions for us. I just thought it would be helpful to bring it up on the screen and see if we're in agreement. Does anyone have anything positive or negative to add?
No. And Dave, I'll make a motion to accept the OSRD application as amended and revised here tonight with the conditions that Abby has enumerated. And so I'm making that motion.
Second.
All right, there's a motion by Mr. Gotti and Mr. McCusker seconded. And seeing no further hands raised or desire for comment. So, and no further discussion, let's have a roll call vote on this. Mr. Gotti?
Yes.
Mr. Paff?
Yes.
Mr. McCusker?
Yes.
Ms. Conant? We lost your audio again.
Hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
So are you in favor of this or against? Yes. And I vote yes as well. So that's 5 votes in favor of granting the special permit with the conditions that we discussed.
Do we need to make that additional motion now to change the language?
That was one of the conditions.
One of the conditions.
So I'll make a motion to change the designated beneficiary of the contribution to the Westwood Affordable Housing Authority.
I think we're already, that was,
Condition 5.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know that was a condition, but I didn't know if it actually officially changed the language. That's all I'm asking.
yeah.
Pat, you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I believe it did.
Very good.
If you want a belt and suspenders approach, you can make an individual motion.
You know, what we could do is, how about a motion requesting that the select board withdraw their article for this, right? Because they haven't done that yet. And we now have changed.
Mr. Chairman, they did that out of respect to your group. I don't like to see boards make recommendations to other boards in that manner. It's not that it's illegal, but they'll be able to handle that on their own.
All right. Well, they'll know that we just wanted, we wouldn't want to risk having things end up in limbo. So now it's very clear that we've made the change.
Yes, and you know, 4 of you spoke in favor of it last week. That particular item, 5 of you voted in favor tonight. I think it's pretty clear, and I will carry it back to the select board. They can, and to the FinCom, that there's one less article on town meeting warrant.
All right, so thank you. Thank you, Dan and Michael.
Yep.
And,
Or just, if you could just vote to close the public hearing.
That was, yes.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing on 25 Clabber Tree Street and 25 Abbey Way.
Second.
there's a motion and a second, so we'll have a roll call vote to close the public hearing. Mr. Gotti,
Yes.
Mr. Paff,
Yes.
Mr. McCusker,
Yes.
Ms. Conant,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. So the public hearing, first public hearing tonight is closed and the special permit amendment is granted. Thank you
Thank you
all.
very much. We really appreciate all the
This-
feedback, and it really helped shape this project into what I hope will be the benefit of everyone.
And
Mr.
thank-
Terry, I think we need to have a phone call pretty soon.
Absolutely. And Abby, if you could share with me the draft decision before we nail it down, that'd be great. So make sure we're all on the same page.
Sure.
And Mr. Hearn, you're talking about soccer fields, correct?
Oh, I'm talking about a lot of things, Mr. Green.
Okay, I know we have a lot. We would love to work with you on this and get this done.
Not a problem. You and your council have been good to work with.
Excellent. Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
You all.
So,
All right,
do you need us to sign an A&R?
Not yet. They have to bring one. They have to do one. That will
Okay.
come back before you.
All right.
Yeah, we'll have to endorse it and then go sign it.
Yep.
All right.
Take
So
it.
that concludes our first part here. So the next item on the agenda is the review of our zoning amendments. And this is another public hearing. And we will go through each amendment individually. We'll discuss whether there are any changes or anything that we want to add to that. And we'll open it up. We'll have public comment on each article individually. Then we will vote to send it on to FinCom for FinCom's final public hearing, which is Monday, March 29th. Okay. So Abby, why don't you bring up
Okay.
your presentation that has the items in there, and some of these we've discussed many times, others will be more discussion tonight.
Can you see my screen?
Yes. So the first article, as we recall, this is temporary uses and structures, and we had early on, our building commissioner came in and talked about this. Is there any further, does anyone want a refresher on this or any questions? Is there anyone who would like to speak on this? Anyone else from the public who would like to speak at the public hearing on this Article 1, temporary uses and structures? If you do want to speak, raise your hand in Zoom. I don't see that, or press *9 on the phone. Abby or Erica, do we have people on the phone who are listening right now? As that would help to know if there's nobody on the phone and they're all in Zoom.
Actually, it looks like everyone's all on Zoom. I don't see any phone numbers in the.
Okay. All right, so I see no one wants to discuss this. Should we have if someone could make a motion to, at this point, we are just recommending that FinCom report this favorably, right?
Yes.
I'll make a motion to send Planning Board Article 1 regarding temporary uses and structures on to FinCom, recommending favorable action.
Second.
There's a motion, Mr. Gotti, seconded by Mr. Paff. Is there any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, roll call vote. Mr. Gotti,
Yes.
Mr. Paff,
Yes.
Mr. McCusker,
Yes.
Ms. Conant.
Yes.
Yes, and I vote yes as well. Article 1 is done, or sent to FinCom for the next public hearing. Article 2. Article 2 is the article relating to firearms, explosive sales and services. It is updating our table of uses to remove this use from local business A, local business B, which is the Islington Business District and the High Street Business District, and to retain the use in the highway business and industrial districts. Are there any questions or clarifications from the board? Nobody raising their hand. Then I would invite public comment on this article. Is there anyone who would like to speak to this? If they can raise their hand in Zoom. Not seeing any hands raised. Would someone like to make a motion to send this to FinCom? With
I'll
a
make a
recommendation.
motion to recommend to the FinCom for a favorable, help me with my wording here,
Action.
a favorable action for Planning Board Article 2 relative to firearms, explosive sales and services.
Second.
Thank you. There's a motion from Mr. McCusker, second from Mr. Paff. Any further discussion? No further discussion. So we'll roll call vote. Mr. Paff,
Yes.
Ms. Conant,
Yes.
Mr. Gotti,
Yes.
Mr. McCusker,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. So Article 2 is sent to FinCom. Article 3. So as at their last meeting, we approved splitting the previous medical uses article into 3 articles. And so we'll go through them individually now. And we can start with what is now Planning Board Article 3, which is the definitions related to office of a doctor or dentist, not a resident on premises, healthcare professional. So first of all, are there any questions, or would anyone like to discuss this before? Because I know that this item came up previously, and there were some questions a couple of years ago about these definitions. I just want to make sure if there's any other questions now, we bring them up. I'm not seeing any questions from anyone, so I will open it up I'll invite public comment on this article. If anyone would like to comment on this, just raise your hand in Zoom. So I don't see any hands raised. Do we need to do anything further with this? I think it was presented at our last meeting, discussed at FinCom. I'm just thinking we have covered it, and we'll present it again at the next FinCom meeting. So if they have questions, we do have a hand raised. So Sandra, shall we recognize Sandra?
Hi, this is Sandra Castellini, 54 Birch Street. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I'm not sure if we're kind of talking about these 3 articles as a group, because the previous slide showed, if you don't mind going back, Abby, it showed where this would take place. And I think that was one of the changes that's happening here, is where this definition would take place. So
So
I know,
I can clarify just to, we are going to have three separate considerations here. So that's the third one is going to talk about the location of a zone, but go ahead if that's helpful to.
no, if you can, so then, I mean, I looked at this slide and I'm looking under I and it says N10. Can you explain that to me?
Right. Dave, if I could just explain, we just couldn't fit it all on one slide. This changes the term office of a doctor or dentist to healthcare professional and keeps where the doctor's offices are allowed now. So it doesn't make any changes to the location. But it adds medical center or clinics to the table of uses in the zoning bylaw, and it prohibits it everywhere except for the industrial zone. There's this little footnote added, the 10, and it just goes on to the next slide where it shows medical centers or clinics are only allowed at University Ave mixed use overlay districts pursuant to section 9.7, which is the University Station.
Okay, so this has nothing to do with what's being discussed about an overlay district for a potential drug treatment facility, correct?
Not yet. That's a later article. So Article 3 is really about updating that ambiguous term office of a doctor and then allowing medical centers or clinics only at University Station, so prohibiting it everywhere else. So this article this was separated from earlier ones.
Great. I just wanted to make sure I was interpreting that chart correctly because I didn't see where the 10 went. So thank you.
Thank you. So that's so nothing, that map doesn't change here. So the footnote 10 is connected to the UAMUD, and none of that would be changed by other zoning changes tonight, or
Sure, then I'll just hold my comment until you talk about something later. Thanks.
Thank you.
I have a question for Abby. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Abby, on the definitions, the office of the healthcare professional is pretty clear, but medical center or clinic, I just want to make sure we're not getting ourselves a little tangled up here because we have eye clinics, we have physical therapy clinics. So how do they fall within the nose across the board here? How do we separate those out?
So
they diagnose, they treat. So technically it's considered medical.
In our existing definitions, we have the office of a healthcare professional.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just, do you have the zoning in front of you? Let me see, pull that up.
No, I do, but I know that there are some, like Westwood Eye Clinic, it calls itself a clinic. So is that going to interfere with the way we're zoning this, or?
No, I mean, I think that would be office of a healthcare professional.
Correct.
I believe it would fall under that definition.
Okay.
How about there was this PowerPoint slide from the presentation before that shows how these definitions are broken out. Rob did a great job of showing that before. Would that be helpful to bring that up again, or?
No, I kind of felt the same way Abby did, but I didn't want it to be challenged at all. And someone say, well, we have these clinics, kind of sprinkled all over the town. How can you say they're not, included in these other districts? So just wanted to make sure that everything is at face value here so people understand it.
And Abby, could you remind us, because we asked about this in the past, like a minute clinic at a CVS is not in this realm because it's considered a retail use. I mean, a lot of things put the word clinic on there, but is that correct, or?
Right. I think we had asked the building commissioner before about like the CVS minute clinic and that was considered retail for like the pharmacy? Is that right? I see Nora has just jumped on here too. She might be able to answer that a little better.
If I could, so this is one of the reasons we're here, because the definitions that were put in at the time of the University Station approval are somewhat nebulous. And so our overall article, when we had this all combined as one article, we were proposing some changes to the two definitions, specifically changes to the medical center and clinic definition. We're still proposing those, but now in Article 5. Where this one is simply putting the uses in the chart to make it clear where they're allowed. The definitions are the existing definitions in this article. A medical center or clinic that rises to the level of needing a special permit, our building commissioner interprets as something larger, something similar to the Brigham and Women's healthcare facility that's on University Avenue. That's clearly a medical center or clinic, not just a single office of a doctor or professional. But there's a question about whether other buildings would be medical centers. Would we allow something in our downtown area going forward, once these definitions are clarified, that we think is a large healthcare facility? If this article goes through, you would not be able to add something new. We don't have to worry as much about anything that's existing, because an existing property that's a going concern remains in its continued state, whether or not it's consistent with the zoning bylaw. This is all about new businesses that would look to come in and making sure that they're put in the appropriate zones. So if a new business wants to come in and it's an office of a healthcare professional, the scale is appropriate for our commercial or local commercial districts, the building commissioner would allow it. If the scale was not appropriate, if it was something that rose to a higher level that would benefit from a special permit, then it would only be limited to the University Avenue district here. So it's the problem is that we have these two definitions now, office of a healthcare professional and medical center or clinic, and neither definition is as strong as it could be. So we are hoping to change those, but we're hesitant to change them in this first article because those definitions currently exclude hospitals and substance rehabilitation treatment facilities. We don't want to alter those definitions in the context of this article for fear that the article will be thrown out if we don't alter them in a way that we also provide some meaningful description of where they're allowed and not allowed. So now that we've separated this into 3 articles, the first one does not change the definitions, it just puts them in the use chart. The second article, which you'll discuss soon, will deal with hospitals, and the third article would deal with substance rehabilitation and treatment facilities and would also address clarifications to all the definitions. So we can talk about that more when you get to Article 5.
Any other questions on this one? And I see a hand raised. So I'll open it up, invite public comment, and if we could recognize Phil Giordano.
Has there been consideration to the use of the words healthcare professional by adding the word licensed? And licensed would obviously implicitly include someone who's got licensure with the Board of Registration in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, because right now where you have a definition of office of doctor or dentist, that's pretty limited because you obviously have to have licensure in both. So the words healthcare professional is an expansion of that. And with the word licensed, you're at least keeping it to the Board of Registration.
Thank you. Nora, Abby, do you have any background on that?
So we're working with the existing definition again. So this is a definition we have now. It's a use that's already allowed. We were not looking to eliminate businesses that are currently allowed as offices of a healthcare professional and limit it to a more narrow sector of the population. So that's not the proposal right now. If that's something the board wants to take up, I think they can discuss that. But I would hesitate to make that change to limit it now because you're then limiting the uses in a district that you've already approved. So the current zoning bylaw allows Office of Healthcare Professional as currently designed at University Station. And if we were to do something different, then I think we would affect the type of uses that are permitted there. And I wouldn't want to do that without further input.
Can I ask a question, Nora? What other uses would we limit? Because I'm assuming a healthcare professional who has an office would have to be licensed by the state. So I'm just curious because I don't know what else is down there that wouldn't have a license. Or
I don't know. I've not researched it, but I don't imagine that every healthcare professional is licensed. And if they were, then adding the word licensed healthcare professional would be redundant. So I imagine that Phil is addressing a concern about some healthcare professionals that would not be licensed. Something, maybe there's a field of a nutritionist, maybe considered a healthcare professional under our current bylaw definition, and maybe wouldn't be if it had to be licensed.
Thank you.
Right. I see I have another comment. If we could recognize Mike Dewan.
Just one quick thing for clarity there. I think the point you made about everyone, I think, is licensed. I think you're talking about the distinction as if you're board certified. And so everyone's going to be licensed, whether they're an acupuncturist or a nutritionist or whatever you said. You know, the other examples, like you said, it's almost redundant. Everyone's going to be licensed. But if you want to talk about making it very specific to a doctorate or something like that, it would be board certified.
Thank you. Let's see, did Mr. Giordano, did you want to ask something else, or do we just need to lower your hand?
Sorry about that. The board of registration is specific, and Nora was bringing up the words healthcare professional is broader than someone who is licensed by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So that was one of the concerns, and that was following up on Ms. Conant's comment. I don't know whether or not someone does or does not have a licensure. Obviously, a doctor or dentist does, but this would be some form of maintaining some control over what comes in and what doesn't.
Thank you. Does anyone, Nora, I'm thinking on that in the uses, like it feels like a separate issue to ensure that whatever the business is that they're licensed. Like, do these things, these are to define, you know, the type of business that's there. Is that?
So this would define a type of use that could go in a specific location. So if you look at the chart there, the Office of Healthcare Professional would be allowed in all the business districts and by special permit in the general residence district. Similarly, if someone did not qualify as an Office of a Healthcare Professional, they very likely would qualify under personal services or professional services. So it wouldn't exclude them from the district. They would just be allowed under a different section of the bylaw. So I understand the distinction there, but I don't think that was something that we were looking to narrow down uses. We're not trying to keep healthcare professionals who are not licensed from practicing or having some type of a facility if they're permitted to do so. We're not trying to move them out of Westwood. So say you had, I don't know what healthcare professional wouldn't be board certified or wouldn't be licensed, so I don't know which one to use, but let's assume you have someone who has a practice, they consider themselves a healthcare professional, there's no license required for their field, and they want to open up a shop in one of our business districts. If they couldn't do it under this section, they probably could do it under personal services. So we're not restricting who can operate. Just like if you want to open a hair salon or a nail salon, you can already do that as a personal services. So
And I think it's not like the zoning isn't like, so the opposite of that would be if you had a doctor who was unlicensed practicing in this office, like that's not a zoning problem. That's a police problem, you know, like that. It's like, because like you say, if it was something, if they're doing something that's legal, but it just is not a licensed healthcare provider, then that could be personal services. So it would fall in. The zoning is about what type of business it is, not whether the people who are there are licensed to a certain level or board certified or whatever.
Right. This article, all it's really trying to do is make it clear where these two different uses are allowed and where they're not allowed. It's specifically trying to make it clear that medical centers or clinics, which are multi-tenanted buildings, so not just a single doctor's office or dentist's office who wants to operate, but a series of offices that are in a single building. That's what we envision as a medical center or clinic. And we just want to make sure that those can't locate in our local business districts or in the general residence district. That's really the only change that we're making here. So we're trying to clarify that there's not a difference between an office of a healthcare professional and an office of a doctor or dentist. They can go in the same places, but a medical center or clinic is a different animal and can only go at University Station.
Thanks, Nora. So is it to simplify yeah, I don't want to repeat what you just said, but maybe I will anyway. It's like, so one, we don't want medical centers or clinics, and we can do that. And so all the no's indicate that, except for the Brigham with footnote 10, or with the Brigham Women's and all. And then the other healthcare professional is more of a language update, or because this office of a doctor or dentist does not capture how there are a number of healthcare providers now that could be doing essentially the same thing. Like a nurse practitioner could have an office there, and that person is not a doctor or a dentist. What are they? They're healthcare providers. So I believe the intent of this is to broaden the definition so that it's not carrying that old wording, which doesn't capture current reality. But the negative or the exclusive part is the second part about the medical centers. We don't want medical centers in other places.
That's correct.
That sounds accurate, Dave.
All right. Are we any further? Is there any other commentary or I don't see any other hands raised. So
and I'll make a motion to send Article 3 regarding medical uses to the FinCom for favorable approval, recommending favorable approval.
Second.
Okay, there's a question I just noticed in the Q&A. So we have a motion from Mr. Gotti, a second from Mr. Paff, and the question is just, this is old, this is 10 minutes ago, but will that cover pain clinics too that can operate, that can open a Pandora's box as well? So pain clinics, would that be considered a office of a healthcare professional? I think it's back to that similar issue. If it's not, it's personal services.
Or it's an office of a doctor or dentist under our current bylaw.
All right, do we have a motion and a second? Is there any further discussion? Then we'll have a roll call vote to send this to FinCom. Mr. Paff?
Yes.
Ms. Conant?
Yes.
Mr. McCusker?
Yes.
Mr. Gotti?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. And we'll move on to Article 4. Article 4, zoning amendment related to medical uses, prohibiting hospitals. So adding a new definition that defines a hospital and prohibits it everywhere. In our previous discussions, we had learned that while some uses are protected, the hospital use is not. And I believe, Abby, what's the rationale for why we don't want a hospital in Westwood?
Well, the planning board had looked at a number of options of where to allow a hospital facility. But over the last, earlier over the last couple of months and since your February meeting, you couldn't find a location that would be a suitable size and fit for a proposed hospital use. So we did check back with our earlier legal opinion, also from our special legal counsel a couple years ago, and reviewed it further with Pat, that hospitals aren't a protected use. So after your February meeting, the proposal brought forward on March 1st by the planning board was to define hospitals and then prohibit it everywhere, because we think it's not protected. It's not a protected use based on the size of Westwood and the land that you have available, the commercial, limited commercial space, and how Westwood is largely residential. So that was the reasoning. We thought that you could move forward with this article that essentially prohibits hospitals in all zoning districts everywhere in Westwood.
All right, thank you. Any discussion or questions? Is there anyone who would like to, anyone from the public who'd like to speak to this issue?
It did, just make sure that people identify their names and where they live.
Let's see. All right, there's a hand raised. Mike Dewan, can you identify name and address and speak?
Yes, Mike DeWan, 167 Carroll, and forgive me, I don't mean to be chatty Cathy tonight. I was unaware of this one, and forgive my ignorance, but so this would exclude even something like I'm thinking of some of these like Stewart hospitals that are kind of northern Boston. So this would exclude even like a 30-bed hospital with a like a 6 or 8 bed ER, like no ICU or something like that. I mean, so well, what's the definition of a hospital? Forgive me for asking something as stupid as that, but can we have
the key thing here? A hospital, a building designed and used for the diagnosis and treatment of human patients that includes overnight care facilities. And just full disclosure, I work for Stewart Healthcare, but I don't have anything to do with where that.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I was just thinking with what's being built in I don't know, with everything being built in University Center and some other places. Again, I mean, no one's expecting Brigham and Women in Westwood or something, but I could see it's just kind of like the continuum of care thing, right? If you have somebody who goes into one of those offices and something's seriously wrong, it's nice if you have a 30-bed hospital nearby with a 6-bed ICU. Not every hospital is the size of some behemoth type of place. But anyways.
Thank you. Thanks for your comment. Are there any additional public comments? Not seeing any board member comments or questions, or if not, we could make a motion.
I'll make a motion that we advance Article 4, medical use zoning article related to prohibiting hospitals, to the FinCom for favorable action.
Second that.
All right, Mr. Paff made the motion, Mr. Gotti seconded. There's seeing no further discussions. There's a Q&A question, so I'll read the question from Fran Fusco. It's not discriminatory to not zone for hospital, but is for substance abuse. So I believe that was in, as Abby had described in the memo from council, that indicated that yes, that it's not discriminatory to ban a hospital, but it would be to ban a substance abuse treatment facility because it's discriminatory on the basis of a disability. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Mr. Paff?
Yes.
Mr. McCusker?
Yes.
Mr. Gotti?
Yes.
Ms. Conant?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Article 4, prohibiting hospitals, that goes to FinCom. All right, well, anybody want to make a motion now to adjourn? No. Article 5, zoning amendment related to medical uses, creating a substance rehabilitation facility overlay district. So I believe that what would be helpful here is to, we could go back to the presentation that was at FinCom, or we could, it might be helpful for us to go through the different zoning areas, but would someone like to, I mean, Mr. Gotti, would you like to start off just describing this again? As
Sure, this would make an overlay district exclusively for substance rehabilitation or treatment facility, which per several of the other presentations we've mentioned, became an issue back in 2013 when the University Station overlay district was created. So this would create an overlay district, and it's currently proposed for Southwest Park. However, I would like to, based on feedback that we got at both the FinCom presentation last week, as well as additional conversations and input that I've received from the Carroll Ave neighborhood. I went down there on Saturday and spoke with 20 odd residents, had a wonderful conversation with people, very respectful. I was sort of laying out some of the things that we presented to FinCom for folks who weren't able to make that meeting. And we had some good, healthy discussion back and forth. And part of the reason I was doing that was because I had mentioned during the FinCom presentation that since Allied Drive and Southwest Park, two of the properties that are under consideration, both mostly affected that neighborhood, I wanted to hear from them in terms of what they thought. And so I think that it based in no small part on the conversations and feedback that I received from them, I would propose changing the destination or the zone where we're going to place this from Southwest Park to Allied Drive. And that was largely based on the fact that Dedham has already zoned their substance abuse treatment facility right up to the line in Dedham on Allied Drive. In fact, there's, I believe it's a eating disorder clinic right there at Dedham Corporate Station. And the parent company that owns that also owns drug treatment facilities. So could be an easy conversion down the line. So, the thought process was, doesn't really change the impact in that area of Allied Drive, but it dramatically lessens the impact for the Carroll Ave neighborhood and potentially eliminates the possibility of being sandwiched between one if one were to ever come, knowing that we were putting a lot of teeth into the special permit regulations to try to keep it, make it a high hurdle from it going there. And, if one ever went in on the Allied Drive side. So my recommendation is to make a change with what we send forward to propose it for Allied Drive only.
all right, it might be helpful to take a step back without talking a ton, but to just sort of revisit, why we are here, why we are trying to do this. It has been a long time with a lot of discussion, but I think it begins from the idea of, do we need to zone for this use or not? And I wanted to see if other board members could we address that first, just to, as we're picking a zone, and as we go to FinCom, we've had a long time now to consider a lot of different things. We want to go with our best possible suggestion. And it begins with first the question of, do we have to make a choice? And I just wanted to, would board members like to speak to that, or what are your thoughts on that?
At our last planning board meeting, I think all four of us that were present at that time agreed that we felt we did have exposure, that we did want to retain control, and we didn't want to see it zoned in any residential neighborhood. So I feel like we've heard from all four of us other than Deb, unless anybody wants to, take a different position than you did 2 weeks ago.
So personally, I'm on the fence a little bit about whether we need to zone for it or not. I think, doing the research, we've seen that the people who have zoned for it, they have gotten these facilities. And, I think, I don't know. I just, I go back and forth. I know that, they're talking 40A, but, my concern would be the Dover Amendment. So I'm not really sure. I think maybe it's not a bad idea to zone for it, but I don't think we're going about it in the right way. And I know I'm going off a little bit here, Dave, but, every time I come to a meeting, I get new information in the packet and a new change in the location that was never presented or discussed with the planning board. Everything still goes back to Southwest Park. And then we hear Allied Drive, and then I see a letter sent out to abutters that includes Southwest Park, Allied Drive, and East Street. So I think we're just all over the place with this. And are we really prepared to move forward? I mean, I feel like every time we come up to bat here, we get shot down by, and understandably by residents. And I don't know. I mean, Dave, you met with these, Rob, you met with these residents and, you discussed the planning board's position on this. I mean, what were their, they obviously were concerned about it being in their backyard, I'm assuming.
Sure. And there was, discussion around Southwest Drive or Southwest Park, excuse me, and the nature of it as an island and whether or not there was, transient pedestrian traffic that comes from the train tracks and absolutely, and there are kids that may party back there, whatever. And so there were a lot of things that were brought up. And so, some of that comes down to, okay, if it's an island, let's make it an island. And what can we do to prevent any of that? Or if there's a better solution to that at Allied Drive, because it's already been zoned there, then that for a lot of people made a whole lot more sense. Now, I'm not going to represent that everybody that was there was on board with that, but I can tell you that quite a few people came up to me, either said it in front of their neighbors or came up to me after and or called or emailed and said, you know what, between those, I'd much rather see it at Allied Drive. So I think that, if we believe that we have an issue, that it's an exposure, and you were the only one that wasn't there at the last meeting because you had the family emergency, totally get that. So you didn't get a chance to weigh in on that, but everybody else was, yes, we do. And so then we wanted to retain control. And I just went down to have that conversation to say, here's how we got here in the first place, just like we've done before FinCom and in front of this group with that working group. And we considered all of the different places that we have put forward so far. And this is the public input process that allows for that movement. I get that it hasn't been the same from, meeting to meeting, but that's because we've gotten the public input. So I feel comfortable, very comfortable with the process that has gotten us here. And I feel comfortable making the recommendation for Allied Drive after having the conversation with the neighbors in the neighborhood.
So what about East Street? How did that fall into I saw the letter to the abutters. Where did that come from? Or is that included in this or no?
The two are right there. It's all part of the same sort of area.
So East Street would be included in the Allied Drive then?
Well, I think that's for the board to talk about tonight. If you decide to change a location, you would need to specify exactly where which properties. So that's to be
You're
determined.
creating an overlay, you can determine where you want that to be.
Right, but what I'm saying is it Southwest or Allied, or is it Southwest or Allied and East Street?
That's what we're talking about tonight.
So it's not a package deal for Allied Drive and East Street. That's what I'm trying to get to. That's not a package deal.
No, this is The only time we have to
12
speak
and a half
as a
acres,
board
sorry.
to come up with a comprehensive decision. And
And
it's,
also, and just like tonight, so I do agree a little bit with Deb in terms of the last meeting. It was a surprise to have things change, but now it's all in front of us. So we can do what we want in terms of defining this. So we can take that map of Allied Drive up there, and I'm not sure what these dots are. Is that a different like the area that has dots all over it on the screen there? Is that
That's our ownership. The other side where there's no dots, that's Dedham.
Right.
so? I mean, you could literally say, I want it to be the corner of 259, 33, 122, 140. That could be we can decide to carve out whatever we want as an overlay district tonight.
And Abby, if I believe that 122, 140, those are the ones that create the 12 and a half acres, or is that the 12 and a half acres defined by those three, or does it include the 333 and the 259 that Davis just said?
The 12 and a half acres includes the properties on the right side of East Street on that map. So it includes everything that has those dots, the gray with dots. The gray represents the highway business district, and those dots represent the flexible multiple use overlay district that all of those properties fall into. So the 12 and a half acres that were determined are all of that gray with blue dots.
And Dave, just one other point of clarification. I know you know it's been mentioned, a surprise, and the reality is that Chris and I were on that advisory panel, and so with two of us on it, we couldn't, in advance of a meeting, talk about it with anybody without violating open meeting law. So we're doing that now here. So I
Right,
just want to put that out there.
And that is, and we do in this process, it's complicated because we also have the FinCom calendar of public hearings and all. So this has been something that it's evolved in public, which is kind of what's supposed to happen. But so tonight we have all the information, and we can work off of this. I would just say, like, it's back to that original, do we have exposure? Like, why are the alternative to all of this is just to throw up your hands and say, well, I think let's just not deal with it. And I want to deal with it, as I've said all along, because there's two things. One is that by not zoning at all, it potentially is available anywhere. But the other thing is that by what this article does, it adds in specific guidance for the ZBA conditions that could be evaluated and used as the basis of a denial. And I think it's by making a choice of zoning, you also get to set the table, to set the rules by which any application is evaluated. And without doing that, then it's wide open. And it's kind of like, for me, it was like seeing what had happened in Dedham related to the firearms things. It wasn't defined, and so there was nothing anyone could do about it. At least if you define it and you set up some criteria by which the ZBA could deny the permit and say, we're denying this because of X, Y, and Z. This is what the zoning says. These are it's additional protections. And so that's kind of what I see as the benefit of taking some action. Because if it was just a matter of who's going to have to suffer, then it's like, that's what people said 2 years ago, is that we don't want to have one neighborhood bear the cost of this. So if you agree that we have benefits by making a choice, then we have to figure out how to make a choice that is the least harmful to anyone, and that has adequate protections. So sorry, I'm supposed to be chairing it, not, but I think we can define it, we can make a choice here, but then we have to, again, ask that question. So even with this choice, are we making someone else, is it fair to do that? So Mr. McCusker, you want to weigh in on this, as you were a part of this for as long as I've been a part of it?
I understand the process. I understand why we're here. Yes, I have agreed since 2017 that this needs to be addressed. My only concerns with Allied Drive being a zone is it's not, my question is whether or not it would be accepted by the Attorney General. I would hate to go through the entire process of voting this through and then come this summer, early fall, find out the Attorney General does not accept this zoning. And we're back at square one. What we have here is frontage basically on the town property line. There is no access between 122, 140. There's no access to Allied Drive. And each one of those properties exists as a property. Nora, can you answer? Do we collect taxes from these properties? Do both us and Dedham collect?
Yes, so both towns collect taxes. Both towns are involved in the approvals of properties there. The most recent development was 40 Allied Drive. That's the Shield MRI building. And the Dedham Planning Board and the Westwood Planning Board actually met in concurrent sessions to approve that property.
Okay, thank you. I love the fact that, you know, for anything to happen in this zone, they basically have to do business with both Dedham and us, which just adds another layer of complexity. I love the idea. I'm just not sure at the end of the day, we get through the Attorney General, and that's my only issue with it. But it is a concern. We've been burned once by the Attorney General over this very situation. I understand it was a technical, you know, bit of compliance that we missed out on the last time that brought us back here today. And I just don't want to see that happen again.
Maybe Mr. Ahern can speak to whether or not this group of properties has something inherently flawed that the AG's office may look at as insufficient.
Well, Mr. McCusker, I share your concerns because sometimes you don't know what you're going to get out of the AG's office. But there's 12 and a half acres here. It's a significant piece of land. I think it would help us that the zoning on the other side also would allow this type of facility. So it gives someone who wants to perhaps do one the ability to put parcels together. You know, it's a concern, but I think it is probably, from what I'm hearing via what Mr. Gotti says and others, the best possible place we can land it at this point in time. So it's a concern, but it's one worth taking the risk on.
Excuse me, Mr. Pat, does the same concern exist with Southwest Park, which is only about a half an acre larger?
It would, from a size perspective. You know, is 12 and a half acres big enough? Is the Attorney General going to accept that that's big enough that we're not being discriminatory? I think it probably helps that the property next door can also facilitate one of these, in some ways making someone who can do parcel combinations or combine lots. It makes it somewhat less restrictive to some degree, but more complex, as Mr. McCusker said, because they'd have to go through two boards. If this is where most people feel it's the best place for it to go, then I think you have to take if you so choose, you can
And the
take
commentary that I heard when I was talking to folks in the neighborhood is that the property that we're talking about is, you know, okay, if the train tracks is the barrier that keeps folks supposedly from their neighborhood at Southwest Park, the 128 highway is a much more intimidating barrier to keep folks out of their neighborhood. So
There's no question. I don't disagree with that at all.
Mhm.
One of the
Yeah,
reasons you folks have split these articles up into 3 is so they can be reviewed individually. I actually have some concerns about whether the AG, given what hospitals have done for us over the past year, are going to allow us to completely outlaw hospitals. You know, you're trying to hit a moving target here. It wasn't that long ago, the attorney generals wouldn't let us, past attorney generals wouldn't let us restrict gun control. This attorney general now lets communities restrict gun control, but you can't outlaw gun sales. So, you know, it's you're trying to hit a moving target. It's good law. The memo's still good, but I think you're setting it up to be the most successful you can hope to be.
Mr. Hearn, I don't know how relevant it is, but do you know where the Dedham's adult zone is? They're,
Oh, I'm sorry, Dave. I used to know that because when I was on the select board, they tried to put it in our backyard, and I had to go to a planning board hearing over there and convince them to move it. I don't remember where they moved it to. But they have not done a stellar job with that because they've had things come in that they didn't want to. At one point, they had put it way down in near Hyde Park, and there was no way you could get to it via a road in Dedham. And the Attorney General ruled you can't do that.
I thought it was down at Blue Hill Drive, like it's similar situation to this, where it's like the back half of the buildings.
Yeah, it could be. I don't know.
Just sort of
yeah.
So it's not unheard of to zone things like this where you split buildings in half because of the town line running down the middle of it. But as you say, if Dedham's already zoned that area,
that would not be a restriction on someone coming in if it's a split lot.
All right.
Dave, I have a question for Abby. This is our second public hearing, and it has changed now to the Allied Drive. And what about the abutters from Dedham? Have they been notified? Because I know they have to be notified according to procedurally. So is that going to throw a wrench into this at all?
We don't, we didn't notify the abutters, but we did, after last week's FinCom meeting, we did put a mailing out to all the property owners and businesses at both all the properties at Southwest Park and these ones and on Allied Drive and on East Street in this highway business zone. Since it came up at the last meeting, we did send a mailing out to them, letting them know about tonight's meeting. Also, we let them know about the FinCom meeting on the 29th. And then the original public hearing notice went to the town of Dedham. So it goes to the Dedham planning office that includes the proposed zoning and more information to our website where they could review it. So the town got it. It wasn't directly to the Dedham properties, but it did go to the town of Dedham.
So, but if you still go to the Westwood website that it directs you to, it still says Southwest. So I guess that's a question for Pat. I mean, we have so many what ifs. I mean, the Attorney General, would they say, well, the town of Dedham Planning Board wasn't truly notified because it said Southwest, not abutting them as closely as it is now?
Well, you haven't voted to move it to this area yet. So, you know, this is still in proposal form.
Is there an obligation for consideration of zoning or just for development, for notification of abutters?
State law requires notification of abutting communities when you're changing your bylaw or when you're implementing special permits or other requirements, but they do not require notification of abutters either in the town where the zoning change is taking place or in abutting towns. You notify a town, all of your neighboring towns, that you're considering zoning changes to your bylaw, and they're welcome to attend your hearing and see how those changes develop. That's the way zoning hearings work. So the
we've
last
done that.
hearing on the first started, it's continued to the FinCom hearing last week. It's continued to this hearing, and I'm sure you'll continue it again. And anyone who's interested in hearing more about how a zoning change develops and participating in that process is obligated to attend the hearing and make their thoughts known.
All right. And so, I mean, if thinking of the opposite situation, if we were constrained by notice of every single change, then we wouldn't be able to get anywhere. Like we'd have to, all the border areas would be off limits. But, we want to be careful because we've had other issues we've had other things that have been the other way around, where Norwood did something or Canton did something and, we weren't notified. And then that was, but that was development. So, but the point is, we are in compliance, right, in terms of the legal requirements here. We notified the town of Dedham that we were considering zoning changes. Now, we didn't give them this map because we just came up with this map recently here. So, but that's not
That
required.
may change again. So we are in full compliance with state law. And also we're in compliance with the advertisement that went out. The changes that you may or may not accept tonight are fully within the scope of the original advertisement.
All right, let me pose a question to everybody. So the throughout this, we made that argument that we're not trying to attract this business. We're trying to protect ourselves, and we find again and again that that's not a winning argument for folks, because the reality is we don't control things. After we set this stage, things happen that are beyond the control of the people here today. So let's assume the worst case scenario. Let's make that be. So assume that we define this zone, and that a business that people fear comes to this zone. So what would we be like, oh my God, I wish we hadn't done that? Or are we thinking that we're doing the best thing we can if we designate it? So specifically, like, I think we would want to narrow the zone to not include East Street and Westwood Terrace and all. I think we would make it as only those three properties. But what if we do that? What if we assume the worst case scenario that the day after this passes town meeting, a substance abuse treatment facility wants to open up at 40. Is that like 40 Allied Drive? Is that like the Shields MRI building or?
Yes.
So, I mean, if we take no action, they could still try that. I mean, they could still do it because it's wide open. But if we do this, they have to go through the ZBA, through the list of requirements, and compare it to the impact on the neighborhood and everything. So anyway, what do people, how are your reactions to that?
Well, in addition to what you just enumerated, Dave, they'd also have to go through data in addition to that. So as you said, if we do nothing, they can still go there where people may be saying it's not the right place. It doesn't mean if we don't zone it there, they can't go there. If we do nothing, everyone is exposed and the town is not protected. If we pick a site and implement special criteria that the ZBA can hold them to, then we have control. And I know that's been said this whole time, and it seems like nobody wants to pick a location that, I don't know that we can pick a location that absolutely no resident could make an argument against.
Actually, though, Chris, I just thought of something. I mean, that's like if Dedham's already zoned for this. So and we have not zoned for it in the same area. So if someone came to Dedham, they'd be thinking, all right, it's zoned in Dedham and Westwood has no mention of this in their bylaws. So we're halfway there. We can get this facility approved in Dedham and it'll be a slam dunk in Westwood because Westwood doesn't have any zoning for this.
So instead of using just the Dedham side of the building, they could apply for the whole building because we haven't zoned for it anywhere else. We haven't said where it can't go if we do nothing. So yeah, all building in Dedham and Westwood is susceptible to an application. But again, I want to get back to, this type of zoning is designed to protect the town. There's other types of zoning that's designed to attract certain desired uses. This is not one of those situations. We're trying to protect our town in the best way we can legally. And I personally, I was part of the group that selected the Southwest Park, and I still believe it has most of the criteria that we're looking for. And I said before at our last meeting, I think it was the FinCom meeting, we don't have a perfect place in town for this. If we did, we just selected it already. We have some pretty bright people living in town and working on our staff. It would have been identified and selected. But it's this public process, this vetting, that gets us to an area that, for the most part, the people will agree to as a way of protecting ourselves. I don't think we're ever going to find something where we don't have somebody who's not opposed to it. That's just the nature of the beast here. But I think doing nothing really doesn't do any service for our town. And I don't think it's us doing our job as elected officials to just turn the other way and ignore this risk that has been laid out to us from two different councils, that we have exposure and risk, and we need to do something about it. So I'm in favor of addressing this, and I am in favor of addressing it in a way that is going to get past town meeting, because this town needs this protection. And I'm open for discussion on Southwest Park or Allied, a combination of both, whichever. I think both are probably equal. Some have, one has, certain exposures or inadequacies that the other may not. And I understand that. So I'm willing to discuss. And it's unfortunate that this process, as was stated before, it's really made, it's forced the planning board to appear as if it's not prepared for these things. And it's really difficult to comply with open meeting laws and be productive in a 2 or 3 hour meeting. In addition to hearing public comments, it's very difficult to get something like this through. It's not impossible, but it's very difficult. We're on our 3rd or 4th different location, and yet there are yet 3 or 4 more that were discussed in the working group that we haven't picked up because of deference to residents and the office located.
I do, and Rob, I just wanted to sort of a timing thing of, I know there's public comment, and I'd kind of like us to have a consensus before we open it up to public comment. And that's kind of why I'm holding off on that.
Sure.
Rob, do you want to go?
Yeah, I mean, if I can actually build on what Chris is saying and address a question that you asked, Dave, which was, assume the worst case, what if one went at Allied Drive? Well, let's actually flip that on its head and say, what if we did nothing, but we were all on the record as saying we agree that we have exposure, and it went somewhere else? You would feel probably, more irresponsible for not having acted as a board and having it go someplace in town that where we had a solution in front of us that we thought we could get through. So I think that from my perspective, if we agree that there's exposure, we agree that we want to retain control, we agree that we don't want it in residences, and we acknowledge that there is no perfect solution, to Chris's point, then we have to have the tough conversation and put something forward that protects as many people as possible, with the teeth that you mentioned, Dave, in terms of the special restrictions, special permitting requirements to protect those nearest to it. So I think by putting this forward, we are doing the job that we were elected to do. That's all I have to say about it.
All right, can we pull up that map?
Or this one shows kind of both area, all the areas you've talked about tonight.
Yeah, so I mean, does anyone want to suggest what we do with this map? I think I've already said what I thought, but
Well, every property we take out of it, Dave, we're reducing the size of the zone, which will be, it'll imperil it more and more for every property we take out. I'm not saying we can't take any properties out, but just understand that every one we do is going to reduce the size of the zone, which is going to imperil it with the Attorney General's office, whether or not they approve the zoning.
Abby, what is the name of the zone for Allied Drive East Street? Do we have a designated name for that?
The highway business, I believe.
Right, it's the highway business zoning district, and it's also in an FMUOD.
So, Mike, to your point, if it's highway business, we're already eliminating all the stuff on Route 1 out of highway business. So reducing it from on East Street, Westwood Terrace and things like that, it's just reducing it by a couple more locations out of the highway business. So removing those doesn't scare me from an Attorney General's perspective. As we indicated, it's about the same acreage as Southwest Park. It just has 3 addresses versus 8 at Southwest Park, which may or may not even enter the mind of the Attorney General's office. I don't know.
Right. My statements have been made. I am happy to put it in any zone. I will go forward with any zone. Since 2017, we need to pick a zone and move forward. And that's what I intend to do.
Dave, my recommendation is the zone that is Allied Drive and East Street there, so that we can have the adequate acreage and is comparable, acre to acre to Southwest Park.
I would also be fine if that's the direction we want to go. I would be on board with that.
I'm sorry, did you say excludes the Westwood Terrace area?
Westwood Terrace, East Street.
Okay.
Essentially excluding
Allied Drive, East Street, yes.
Right, excluding the Hilton, the storage facility, and then Westwood Terrace and any of those other properties that are residential down Vincent Drive, which is off in Dedham.
Okay. I do have one quick question for Pat. Pat, if we zone for this, can the Dover Amendment still come in and put it somewhere, anywhere? Did he leave or is he still there?
Yeah, probably not, but you're always hesitant to say absolutely not in the field of law. I think it would be a challenge for someone to come in and try and put a substance abuse facility somewhere other than where it's zoned. Even with a Dover Amendment, if they try and usurp or assert an educational position or a religious position, I think it would be a challenge for them. I think we would have a far more defendable position than if we don't zone for it. That's really my biggest concern. One of the things that can keep me awake at night is if it with no zone at all, it can go anywhere, and we could get a use that's distasteful to virtually everyone around them and everyone in the community, and we would be without weapons to fight it, and we would spend probably a lot of money in litigation trying to fight it and probably not be successful. That's something that keeps me awake at night.
let me just clarify again, because Deb's question was mine too. So Rob, are we proposing to include all of the dots on the map or to exclude the Hilton and the extra space
From
storage?
259 all the way up to 1200, 20 and 24 and 9, right? Or I don't know if 9 falls in it or not, but.
Sorry, you mean Are you talking just from 40 Allied Drive here to this 249? Is that the area you're talking about? So that's
Whatever made up the 12 and a half acres, and I believe that Nora had mentioned that it was inclusive of that little parcel where your cursor is, as well as off to the right, just to the right of East Street.
The 12 and a half acres includes everything from lot 259 through lot 24, everything that's in the highway business and FMUOD 5. It does not include lot 9, but includes the rest of it. That adds up to 12 and a half acres, more or less. If you were looking to exclude the 3 East Street properties, 20, 24, and 1200, then it would be about 9 acres, just over 9 acres would be left. So if all you were doing was going to the west of East Street and Allied Drive and excluding the properties that are close to Westwood Terrace, then it would be 9 acres.
That's still pretty sizable.
Do we have any information about zoning that has, I know this is a protected class that we're talking about, but special overlay districts that aren't as large as 9 acres, or Nora, do you have any idea off the top of your head what our adult zone is in terms of?
I can tell you what our adult zone is. Just give me a minute.
While Nora's looking that up, I at one point had a conversation with Selectman Walsh, and his office, I believe, maybe in that number 9 plot there. And he was suggesting that this was a good location for this to be a solution to this nagging problem.
He was suggesting the East Street properties, 20.
He suggested that this Allied Drive East Street solution would be a good solution for, especially for the neighbors in the Cherry, Birch, Westdale, Hawthorne, Carroll Ave area.
But we still have to think about the residents in the Westwood Terrace area. So I think.
Yeah, although the 8, 20, and 32, I think it would be disingenuous for this board to not consider those residents, but just consider those in Cherry.
Mhm.
I would be in favor of pursuing something that didn't include East Street and everything. Now, I'm not even a big fan of the Hilton, but I know nothing's going to get built there. But you just, I don't know. On the face of it, it seems to me that starting at 259 and ending at 40 would be
Well,
I don't feel like I'm
Isn't
being.
the Hilton like a good candidate for making a big rehab hospital?
Maybe, I don't know.
I mean,
Well, that building isn't actually the Hilton. The Hilton is behind that.
Right. No, I know. But it's all connected.
Yes.
So if the Hilton wanted to sell to somebody, they could technically not even put any of it in Westwood. They could have removed that part of the building there and put it all in Dedham, assuming that the Hilton building is part of the Dedham district.
It is, but I don't believe that building comes across our property line.
It does.
It does. A portion
Shows right there.
does.
The one in the 3.
So I can answer a couple of questions that have been asked. The adult district in Westwood is 21.75 acres. So roughly a little bit more than twice what if we just looked at the Allied Drive zone. Second question is that East Street property that's between the 2 sections of East Street, that is the corner of that is in Westwood. So there are commercial office tenants that are in Westwood in that building that's attached to the Dedham Hilton. And then there was a question earlier about where Dedham's adult district is. If you're still interested in that, it's at Legacy Place.
Oh, okay.
Really?
So that was more of a strategy of put it in a place where the value is so great that it'll never be worth building anything like that there, I guess.
Which is very similar to our strategy in putting it on University Avenue. One other point I can introduce is that the Dedham has substance abuse treatment facility districts throughout Dedham in many locations, including most of Route 1, including Legacy Place. In this area, their district is along Allied Drive. It does not cross over East Street. So if you look at the map there, the Dedham Hilton building is fully within that district. the houses on, is that Willard Street, are not in that district. So the district stops to the left of East Street.
I like the idea of those 3 contiguous parcels over there. And I get it, like it seems like we don't really know what the acreage, like if there's a line, if it's like, oh, if it's under 8 acres, it's no good, but if it's over 8 acres, it's okay. So I feel like including all of these is not necessary unless somebody tells us that, well, you've gone below the limit or something. But why don't we?
I think the advice we've gotten so far from council is it's a moving target. We're not sure.
Yeah.
And in that light, I would be more inclined to propose sticking with those 3 or 5, if you want to include 259 and 233, those addresses to make up the substance abuse treatment facility overlay district.
Would you be in favor of or opposed to the piece that is attached to the Hilton? Because
I
that
would.
still has East Street separating it, and it still has the other overlay district buffering it from the neighborhood. So I think just to get some additional acreage, I would like to include that.
How much acreage is that? Is that 1 or 2 acres there?
1.42 acres.
Good guess.
Deb, what did you say?
I think that's, we had listened to a gentleman speak at one of our meetings saying that they like to go in and buy up hotels or apartment buildings that aren't being used and make those into rehab facilities. So to leave the Hilton in, I would think would be a little bit more risky than excluding it. So as we're going with this, I said we just go with what the 40, 100, 122 and see what happens from there.
I'm about getting us to a solution to put this to rest. So if that can get us a unified vote that, obviously we want something that can't be overturned, but if I would include the additional 2 little parcels to the left.
The 259 and 333.
Correct.
Yeah. And Rob, just to your point, I hear what you're saying. I don't see how 1.4 acres is going to all of a sudden make the AG's office go, all right, that's big enough now. I mean, if it added 10 more, then yeah, it'd be worthy of a conversation. But I think optically, it's not a good location to include here. All of the entrances off Allied Drive for those other properties are hidden from view, so to speak, and they don't carry with it the added risk of potential of a building that is built with number of beds. Bedrooms are already built, which has been explained as one of the recipes for a quick entry for this type of use. So again, if it was more acreage and I thought it might make a difference to the Attorney General's office, I would be inclined to include it. But for 1.4 acres, I don't think it's worth it.
All right, I think I like that approach. I think that's something we could support.
And I would say that probably is even better for both the Westwood Terrace neighbors, as well as it gets it further down the highway side of things and creates more of a natural barrier to the other neighborhood as well. So I could be supportive of that.
It's also, if the Attorney General is interested, it's easy access to public transportation.
Correct.
With the train station right there.
It's true. That's you're right.
A valid point, Chris.
All right. Shall we continue our public hearing? Not continue. Shall we start the public hearing portion of this meeting and invite members of the public to comment? And I know we have some things in the Q&A, which a lot of times what I would do is recognize the people who are here to speak first, and then we'll go back to the Q&A and work through that list. So people who have their hands raised. And I would ask you to give your name and address, and I will start with Mike Dewan.
My friends, we've come a long way. I obviously made a very impassioned plea last time and a couple years ago, and I want to thank those that came by the neighborhood this weekend and were willing to discuss it. That Allied Drive location, specifically when you carve out the Hilton, like you said, the risk to all of us, I'm sorry, I'm at 167 Carroll Ave, forgive me. The risk to all of us over on this side, as you said before, is the same, because Dedham already has its zone for it. So we're not really taking on any additional risk. There is no sidewalk from Allied Drive connecting it to the Rotary. There is a little sidewalk on the Rotary, but it just exists to nothing. If you put it on that southwest location, how is the person going to get there? If they're in their car, you're now going to have more people bombing down this road than we already have right now on Carroll Ave, because Waze is going to direct them off the Rotary down Carroll, then to turn right. How are they going to get there if they don't have a car? This was one of the concerns also when we were looking at the Meditech building. If it's over on Allied Drive and they have a car, they exit, they go there, it's not crossing anybody's homes. Again, risk is the same to all of us over here. If they don't have a car, they can take the train station there. And I want to understand that I hear what you're saying. You've been at this a long time, and the concern is we're going to submit this, it's going to get denied by the Attorney General, and here we go again. And I'm empathetic to that, but I would ask you, please, you have to give it a shot. And if you have it, those 3 buildings plus that tiny little parcel on the other side, and it gets denied, well, then that's another bit of information. You can look at it again. But I don't want to speak for everyone, but as has been brought up many times from the beginning here, there's no perfect place. I think everyone's concern has been, and again, my passionate plea last week, don't put it near kids. You're not putting it near kids. You're identifying a location. It's the same risk as it is now. There's no easy route or transit for the person to come through here. It's not increasing traffic in this neighborhood. And if someone doesn't have a car, they can easily get there. So I can tell you as one person living on Carroll Ave, that makes a lot of sense. I commend you and I thank you, because politics are never easy, let alone local politics. But ultimately, through all the rigmarole, we've seemed like I've identified the right situation. So I thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Let's go to Diane McCarthy.
Hi, this is Diane McCarthy, 249 Dover Road. My comments are probably very different than some that you've already heard. I'm trained initially as a clinical social worker. During those years, I ran community health centers. I got my law degree and I now practice healthcare law. I am on the chair of the Community Services Board of Dimmock Health Center, where one of the services we provide and significant services we provide are to those individuals who suffer from substance use disorder. One of the main problems for folks who suffer from substance use disorder is housing and treatment. And I think we all know that. Probably of those of us in this room and listening on Zoom tonight, 6 out of 10 of us have relatives, friends, family, siblings, children who suffer from substance use disorder and who are in desperate need of treatment that they can't find. I urge you, before you decide that you need to protect our community from our friends, our family, our siblings, our kids, that you educate yourself a little bit about these substance use facilities and understand who they are, who you're protecting all of us from, and then decide where we want to welcome folks who need this kind of treatment into our community. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll recognize Paula McLaughlin.
Hi, thank you for taking my comments. I just want to thank you all for doing what you're doing. I know can sometimes be a thankless job. I was part of the group that met on Carroll Ave, the Carroll Ave community that met with Rob Gotti last weekend. I know this isn't easy. Everybody, there's a lot of people who don't want it in their backyard. I get that. I was vehemently opposed to the Meditech suggested spot last year, and because it is right in our neighborhood. There's a lot of people that walk in that neighborhood, and there were a lot of reasons why I didn't think Meditech was a good situation. I will say that when everything is considered, I agree that we have to have it somewhere. If we have to zone it somewhere, there's never going to be anyone that says it's a good spot. But if we had to choose, I think Allied Drive seems like a logical place. I've gone and visited everywhere that people have suggested for a lot of the same reasons that you've just discussed. It does seem like if the Attorney General takes it, that would be a good place. I do wonder if, I know the whole sort of onus of this is that we're protecting, and I know, and I get that we need to have a place, but we're zoning it with the intention that we don't know that anybody is going to pick that as a spot. And so my question is, does this go to the Attorney General as a section, even if somebody else doesn't want it? Or if somebody doesn't want it, or does it go only when somebody comes to the town and says they want to put a facility in there?
What happens, Paula, is when and if this were to pass town meeting, we would send these articles to the Attorney General for review. And they would opine whether or not they pass constitutional muster or not.
Okay, I appreciate that, Pat. Thank you. Congratulations on the new baby, by the way. All right,
Please
so thank you.
I didn't have it. It was my daughter. Thank you.
But thank you. And I do appreciate it. I just want to say that Rob did spend an awful lot of time listening, trying to come up with solutions. And, I can only speak for my husband and myself when I say that we do appreciate the thought that was put into this. So thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, are there any other hands raised? Yes, Mr. Giordano.
Hi, just a couple of questions. Is the legal opinion's a couple years old. Has there been thought to update it and to make a determination as to what has been approved by the Attorney General, by acreage, by restriction, et cetera, just to make a determination as to whether or not this would be acceptable by the size of the parcel that's being under consideration? And then the second portion of the question is, in terms of reasonable restrictions, it's one thing, I think, if the substance abuse facility is a counseling facility as compared to dispensing medication, et cetera. Has that been considered as to part of the reasonable restrictions that might be considered?
So the first answer to your question, Phil, is I looked at that memo and went back to see if there was any case law contrary to it and could not find any. And then I looked at some decisions from the AG, but the AG has never defined that I could find bright line, you must have 8 acres type of thing. I guess the best decision you can read from the head of the government section at the AG was the town of Millbury, which tried to promulgate regs which wouldn't allow a substance abuse facility. And if you want, I'll be happy to share it with you. I've got a copy of it.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to see it.
Wouldn't allow it within 1,000 feet of, and I'll butcher this, but schools and a variety of things. And so essentially it limited almost nowhere where it could go, apparently, in Millbury. And I've said before in public meetings, they ended up with a substance abuse facility right next to one of their public elementary, or near one of their public elementary schools, and in a business district. And they tried to fight that as well, my understanding is, and probably spent funds and were unsuccessful. So that's the first question. I'll let Nora and Abby answer your second.
So all substance rehabilitation and treatment facilities would fall within this section of the bylaw, and all such facilities would be reviewed under the special permit requirements by the Zoning Board of Appeals. The criteria would be applied consistently, but a facility that offered one level of treatment would be viewed differently by the zoning board than a facility that offered a different level of treatment. That doesn't mean one would be permissible and one wouldn't, but they would be looking at the criteria that go along with it and the effects on the neighborhood, the provision of security, the best practices used on the facility. So the zoning board would review any application it receives and would look at the facility that's proposed and make a specific determination, specific findings of whether that facility fit at the location where it was proposed and had all the necessary provisions in place to make it a safe facility that would have no negative effect on the neighborhood.
I understand. I've looked at the Washington Street papers in Dedham, and that is one of the core of their arguments, is that there is no dispensary, there's no provision for medication, etc. From my research, it appeared that we would meet the Attorney General's criteria without necessarily including having medication. And that's one thing that I'm trying to catch up on what's going on. But that would be one question that I would ask, which is it or is it not? And I'm not sure we know the answer just yet, but it seems like it might be. If we did not, if we zoned for the Allied Drive property, but still were able to maintain a reasonable restriction as to it being counseling, therapists, etc., without dispensary of medication, would that pass muster? That's part of my question.
So Pat or Nora, like,
I don't have an answer for you
Phil,
right
are you
now.
saying, oh, go ahead, sorry.
I don't have an answer for that right now, Phil. That'd be something I'd have to look at. That's not something that the planning board is talking about.
Okay.
It would. So I'm just trying to think about what type of facility you're talking about. You're talking probably about an outpatient facility that has no medications. Is that what you're?
Using the Washington Street Dedham papers as kind of the, I guess, the
benchmark?
Template. Yeah, the template, Pat. I've gone through that pretty carefully and saw the applications, the attorneys' opinions, the et cetera, of all the people that are trying to get that through Dedham. The core of their argument is the lack of dispensary of medication. Now, obviously, Dedham is in a different position than Westwood.
Right.
But if that could be a core meeting of the Attorney General's criteria, but not necessarily, and it certainly could be a reasonable restriction. If that would pass muster, I think that would be something that would be meet, legal requirements without necessarily, and also possibly having a greater opportunity to pass at town meeting.
No, I understand. I guess I'm going to have to try and take a look at that situation and see if see if it's feasible for us. The other thing you have to remember is Dedham has zoned more than one area.
Right.
So I would want to know if have the same restrictions along Allied Drive that they do along Route 1.
That's a good question. That would be interesting to know.
Yeah, and this may also be a novel approach based on the applicant trying to reduce friction of the application, if you know.
Because in essence, it becomes another, therapeutic counseling, facility. And it is just simply someone who has treatment of a different nature. And I think that would certainly be something that residents would be considering or be more accepting of. But then we, as Mr. McCusker was mentioning, we don't necessarily want to go down the path without having kind of our ducks in order and go to the Attorney General without knowing, is this going to pass muster or not? So that's why I was posing the question.
Rob, you've got your hand raised. Do you want to?
Yeah, just a point of procedure on that, right? So if we are putting something forward to the FinCom to vote favorable action on, can we do that tonight while Pat is doing the research required? Because if we cannot do that, and Phil raised an interesting point. So if we cannot do that and we cannot then get it to FinCom, we have then effectively kicked this down the road another year, at least.
Right. I mean, my thought is, medication is often part of their treatment. And that's the definition is substance abuse and rehabilitation treatment center. So taking out the treatment, I'm not very supportive of that, because it could be more dangerous. You could have more calls to the facility. You could get, those residents that are there, if they're not being properly treated, there may be more emergency calls to the facility. I think medication is an important part of that treatment.
The Dedham papers, just respectfully, I think, Adler Pollock's papers are pretty comprehensive. They're a great law firm. And the Washington Street application, if I'm not mistaken, precludes medication. And I went through quite a few of them. And I know there was a meeting that's postponed until, I think it's tomorrow night. But I'd be curious to know that as a criterion, no one is saying that we are not saying that persons that are disabled with substance abuse should not get treatment. But just like we are limiting hospitals that provide overnight care, we are putting certain reasonable restrictions on care that might be of another kind of patient.
But
And I don't think that.
Whoa, Phil, we are not limiting hospitals. We are saying we don't want hospitals in
Right.
Westwood.
But that was my point. I was trying to draw an analogy back to saying that certain patient care has a place and certain patient care might not have a place.
It sounds to me like the applicant is using this as is putting this forward to make his application more reasonable to the parties that be in Dedham. I don't think, I'd have to look at the Dedham bylaws or zoning bylaws, and I will, but I don't think they've restricted that area to no medication. I would be shocked if they did.
But then the question is, can we or not?
Yeah,
is that something that should be done?
And that's perhaps a matter of first impression at the Attorney General.
Because Pat, wouldn't we have an issue with, since we are effectively we would be trying to regulate the operation through the zoning, and if you make it so restrictive, then you're prohibiting it again, and you have the same problem. Like if it's excluded from the definition of the zoning, then you might be in a situation where you could do it anywhere again. You'd say, well, this zone we've defined does not allow treatment. Okay, but if treatment turns out to be a protected activity, then that means we've failed in the whole thing, because it's.
Yeah, I'm not, as I sit here and think about it, I'm not sure we can prescribe what proper substance abuse treatment is within our town, per se. I think that's getting to it's a little prescriptive, and you're limiting where it can go and how they can treat people.
Sounds like you're giving the Attorney General more reason to say no.
Yeah, I think you perhaps are, but Yeah,
I think at this point in this process, I with all of this being conjecture, I'm not comfortable changing this on the fly like that to that type of verbiage. I'm comfortable with where we are, and I would not feel at all safe in just kind of rolling the dice and saying, all right, medicine is not allowed, but we'll handle psychiatric therapy or something like that. We haven't done that research for this, and this is our last meeting before the FinCom meeting. Is that right, Abby? Yeah, we will be here till 6 in.the morning with Pat doing research on Google. Until that's too big of a thing to do.
All right, let's, Deb, did you have a?
Yeah, to Rob's point though, about being ready to send it on to FinCom until Pat did the research, we've come up with a zoning area that we think is good, but we don't have any conditions. We have
Oh,
nothing.
yes, you do.
Yeah, we do.
Maybe we should put
It's everything. It's the overlay district that we wrote before.
Oh, okay.
We're just moving it.
Right, all those special permit requirements still exist.
I want to, I would like to continue the public comment here. So let's see, Skip Wells. If you could identify yourself and address. And
Skip Wells, I make my home at 10 Longwood Drive. I would just like to say I think the entire process is wonderful testimony to the wisdom of public input and public servants.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see, I don't see any other hands raised.
There is some questions, Mr. Chairman.
So there's some questions. So I'm just I'll read everything in the Q&A, and if somebody wants to refresh things, because I know that some of these were posted a long time ago, so I'll just read through. Fran Fusco asks, oh no, that was an older one. Let's see, Skip Wells, you just spoke, I think, but I'm saying, where exactly is the proposed Allied Drive site? I believe
I think you got that answer.
Fran Fusco, why can't we get unbiased outside legal advice from an attorney? It's a lame excuse to say the town doesn't want to pay for such an important decision. We have spent far more money on less important things. Let's get it done, right?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to address that. We have gotten unbiased legal advice from Dan Bailey and myself. Dan Bailey is, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, he's as fine a zoning and land use attorney as you'll find in the Commonwealth. So we're actually fortunate to have him. And I don't know what's biased about his opinion. So unless someone shows me with tangible proof there's some bias, I'm pretty good with Dan's opinion and my backing it up.
Okay, Ellen Rawlings says, I think I'd like to better understand the working group's process on vetting proposed sites and why Allied Drive was not moved forward initially, as it sounds like there is already inherent risk in that neighborhood based on Dedham's zoning, which I believe changed in 2017.
I can speak to that. The main reason it wasn't put forward was due to its size. We were looking at Fox Hill Village specifically because it was already in the ARO zone, which allowed nursing homes, which we saw as a similar use, and because it was over 100 acres. So our working group was initially looking for the parcels that we thought were in limited ownership, large size, and already inherently at risk. So that was why we initially looked at all of the ARO zones in 2017. That's why we looked at just a portion of it in 2019 and then again this year. But then when we heard that the residents of Fox Hill Village were as opposed to having a substance rehabilitation treatment facility near them as the residents along East Street were to having it near them, it was the same situation. I think we had talked at the last meeting about proximity and how close a building could be to a residence, and it really was the exact same situation. So we were looking for high traffic areas close to the highway, large size. This Allied Drive location met all of the criteria except for the fact that the parcels are only partially in Westwood and they're small. So the issues that you have already addressed here tonight.
Nor if I can build on that, the other thing that we had talked about was given the opposition when it was proposed at the two AROs to the East Street ARO specifically, when we initially had the conversations, we were like, this is also, you know, relatively adjacent to that. And we anticipated there might be opposition from the same neighbors who opposed the East Street ARO as well. So that was the initial reason why we had sort of moved on from that to other locations. And to the size question, at the time, we were looking for a joint overlay that accommodated both hospitals and substance abuse facilities, which was why we were looking at the bigger lot.
The next question, Fran Fusco, if zoning for this was so important, why did we pivot so quickly to remove the grandfathered zoning at the lodge property to take it out of there and find another place?
Mr. Chairman, I'll respond to that if you'd like. We did nothing to remove the grandfathered use at Westwood Lodge. Westwood Lodge sat there fallow for the longest time. We were fortunate in that a developer had vision and saw it use as what's currently being built down there, but the town took no affirmative action to remove any grandfather provision for a substance abuse facility at Westwood Lodge. It just didn't work in the marketplace.
Next Q&A is Sandra Castellini. What about the Westwood residents near Dedham East Street side near Allied Drive? Were they notified?
No residents were notified other than through the mailing that went to every single resident in town that provided information on the FinCom hearings, as is done every year. Whenever there's a zoning change, it's specifically notified in that, which is mailed to everyone. The planning board does not send out a separate notice.
Okay, there's the next Q&A is Annie Lewis O'Connor, 42 Hawthorne Street. I support the article for Allied Drive. I also wanted to echo the comments made by the resident that works at Dimrock Health Center. These are people that are struggling with a disease. They are subjected to stigma and bias and should make us pause and reflect on that. Fran Fusco, giving a written prescription is a lot different than handing out drugs. And then Barbara Clark, I believe, wants to speak and has her hand raised. So can we recognize Barbara Clark?
Yes, Barbara Clark, 10 Longwood Drive, Fox Hill Village. I would just like to correct the record. I believe that someone said, I'm not sure who, that Fox Hill Village, the ARO, was a zone of limited residence. And we are in fact 336 homes with over 400 residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I see no more Q&A in the Q&A, and I don't believe anyone else has their hand raised. So I'm going to go back to our discussion here. I believe that we had a consensus perhaps, and could we make a motion to solidify that and move forward?
I'd like to make a motion to advance Article 5 regarding medical use substance abuse treatment facilities to be located at an overlay district, be located at Allied Drive, running from, and forgive me, Abby, I don't have the map up in front of me. If you could just give me those plot numbers.
Okay, can you see that now?
I can, that run from lot 259 contiguous to 333 over to 122, 100, and lot 40. I would like to propose that be designated the substance abuse overlay district.
Just to be clear, should we, are they lot 40 and 100 or address?
Those are the addresses. Would you like to know the lots? I can
Thank you, Chris.
tell you the
I
exact.
think we can go by addresses. Would that be sufficient? Or we can.
The bylaw will be drafted with the specific lots in it.
Okay, then we should use the lots.
So let me just call those up, just 1 minute.
Nice catch, Chris.
I don't see a lot number for 259, so we'll have to check with the assessor on that. The lot for 333 is Assessor's Plat 17, Lot 176. The next lot up at 122 Allied Drive is Assessor's Plat 17, Lot 174. Moving down the street to 100 Allied Drive, that's Assessor's Plat 17, Lot 173. And the last one, 40 Allied Drive, is Assessor's Plat 17, Lot 172.
So I'd like to amend the motion or the recommendation, the motion to include the lots as mentioned by Nora Loughnane.
I would second that if we're looking for a second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. So, and does your motion include everything here? Like basically, are we changing the proposal to be specifically that? Do we want to have a separate vote to recommend it to FinCom, or is that incorporated in
I was
that?
incorporated. So I was recommending forwarding Article 5 with the change in the designated lots to become the medical use, substance abuse and treatment facility overlay district to the lots that Nora mentioned. Is that specific and adequate enough a motion?
I think yes. And Chris seconded that.
Second that. I'll do that again.
Is there any further discussion?
Debbie, you're muted.
Is there any way so that when the public reads the article, that they know what business is attached to that, so that they know it's not the Hilton, it's not, they know exactly where that location is? Can we put that in there?
The article, each of the lots will be noticed by their assessor's plat, lot number, and street address.
So the street address, they could deduce that.
Okay.
Right, and we will create a new map. So after this, I would work with our mapping person to show that new area on a map.
And if that's important to you, Ms. Conan, I think it becomes part of the information that you put forward to the FinCom and to town meeting so they understand.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, there's a motion. Let's see, I see a hand raised. Is that, no?
I think that's from before.
All right, there's a motion and a second. We'll have a roll call vote. Mr. Gotti,
Yes.
Mr. McCusker,
You're muted.
Sorry about that. Yes.
Mr. Paff,
Yes.
Ms. Conant,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. So the motion carries. Let's see, that is we have one other article, the housekeeping article, right? Is there nothing's changed with the housekeeping article since the last meeting, right?
Right.
So this is just, is there anyone who wishes to speak about the housekeeping article? I'm seeing no interest in speaking on that. So could someone make a motion to recommend that to FinCom?
I'll make a motion to advance Article 6, is it? To, otherwise known as housekeeping, to FinCom for favorable action.
A second.
All right, they have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Ms. Conant,
Yes.
Mr. McCusker,
Yes.
Mr. Gotti,
Yes.
Mr. Paff,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. And so that article is forwarded to FinCom. All right, are there any other zoning issues to discuss now?
I would just make sure you make a motion to continue your public hearing to Monday, March 29th at 7 PM on Zoom.
So moved.
Seconded.
All right, there's a motion and a second to continue the public hearing to the FinCom meeting. We'll have a roll call vote. Ms. Conant,
Yes.
Mr. Paff,
Yes.
Mr. Gotti,
Yes.
Mr. McCusker.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well, so the public hearing is continued. And other business items, and thank you everyone who participated, in the public and everybody here. The next other business items, Abby, do you want to go through, tell us, so we need to select a peer reviewer for this upcoming application. You want to?
Right. I know Rob's new, but for new construction projects, the planning board typically will hire or consider hiring a peer review consultant to professionally review your plans and material. Scheduled for your next meeting on April 6th. You do have an application proposed for redeveloping the two gas stations on High Street, that's 710, 722. So our typical practice is we send out a request for interest and receive back a scope of service and an estimated cost from the consultant. So you did receive two, one from Beta Group and one from PSC, Professional Services Corporation. They've both worked in Westwood before in past projects. So tonight I would ask you to consider selecting one of them tonight. That way I would then, and then it's the funding for the consultant is through the applicant. So then the applicant is paying that service, but the goal here is to get them on board as soon as possible. So that way they can review the application and report to you at your first public hearing. So they'll at least still be reviewing the material while you're reviewing it, and they'll give you an updated, their summary at your opening of the public hearing on April 6th.
And it's just the two quotes, Abby? Just the two quotes?
Yes.
Does anyone have a preference?
I think PCS has done a great job, and they came in a little less than Beta did overall, I believe.
Yeah, I think they were like $1,500, $1,200.
Yeah, they've been pretty thorough.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with either work product from either company. I do think we do, sometimes we need to be cognizant of how often we hire Beta. They are an excellent company, but I do think we need to be mindful of the fact that we may be losing out on other companies' bids because maybe we're going to the Beta well a little too often. And I'm not saying I would be against selecting Beta in this instance, but I think that is something that we need to consider. So I would be fine with PSC. The PCS or PSC? I've lost track of
PCS.
PCS.
I would happily defer to the four of you, having seen, you've all seen work product from both. So I would trust your judgment in terms of, it's a close call on the actual dollar amount. So if you have preference between the two, I'm happy to go along with whichever the four of you think.
All right, Chris, you want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we accept the proposal from PCS. All right, I guessed right. To act as peer review consultant for the property application at 720 High Street. Is that what it is?
710.
710 to 722.
Jessica is saying something to me, but I can't read it. So the mobile and the golf stations on High Street.
Second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Roll call vote.
Discussion.
Any discussion? All right. Mr. Gotti,
Yes.
Mr. Paff,
Yes.
Ms. Conant,
Yes.
Mr. McCusker,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. So we'll choose PCS for the peer review for that. All right, let's see. We have some meeting minutes from February 23rd. Are there any corrections or additions to those meeting minutes?
Nope,
Nope.
not for me.
All right, I'll
I'll make a
entertain.
motion to accept the meeting minutes for February 23rd as submitted.
All right,
Second.
second by Mr. McCusker. Roll call vote, Mr. Gotti,
You're muted, Rob.
I know. I'm actually going to abstain because I didn't see them in there. So I didn't get a chance to read them. So I'm going to abstain from this one. I just refreshed and I still don't see them. So
If you're not signed in, you won't see them. So if
I
it,
see everything else though.
yeah, well, everything else is kind of a matter of,
I'm signed in because I can see all the stuff that is only available to us. So the only thing I don't see is the minutes.
Oh, you know, it's item under other business, item 1C. You know, I realize they're not actually called minutes. It just says
Oh,
23
forgive me.
drafted.
I didn't know if it was related to the other stuff because it was in between the two
Yep.
things. So my apologies. I did not read them. So I am unprepared to vote on them.
all right, let's see, did we?
we had a second, you called on Rob. He's now abstained.
All right, Mr. Paff,
Yes.
Mr. McCusker,
Yes.
Ms. Conant,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. And those meeting minutes are approved. Let's see, do we have anything else on the agenda this evening?
The only other thing is I just wanted to, I guess I selected a couple meeting dates. I know not everyone knows their schedule yet, and we don't know what will be happening after May, but we have to do our schedule out a little bit because applicants start asking about timelines. So I'm suggesting Tuesday, May 18th, Tuesday, June 18th, and Tuesday, June 29th, which is 3 weeks in between each meeting.
I can't see any conflicts on my calendar for those.
What was the middle one you said?
June 18th.
Tuesday, June 18th.
I don't
And
have
June
that.
8th.
That's a Friday.
Oh,
The
really?
18th?
Hold on.
No, it's May 18th, June 8th, and June 29.
Thank you.
Yes, yes, that's what my
June
handwriting
8th,
says.
not 18th. Okay.
June 8th,
Right.
sorry, June 8th, yep.
Okay. I don't have a conflict with those.
All right, sounds good. Anything else? Would someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
I was looking at my clock and I was like, wait, it's 9:10. I'm like, oh no, daylight savings time. There's no way it's 9:10.
Days, Dave. Days. Take the clock off the wall and spin the little dial.
I get so many, like my watch. I'm like, okay, 10:08. All right, so there's a motion to adjourn and a second. Roll call vote to adjourn. Mr. Gotti,
Yes.
Mr. Paff,
Yes.
Mr. McCusker,
Yes.
Ms. Conant.
Yes.
Yes, and I vote yes as well, and we are adjourned. Thank you.